There we go.
Alrighty.
It shows.
Streams live.
I thought I pushed live the first time. We got started. Let's try this again. Because let's see if I don't fall on my face this time.
Everyone thinks because you're a zombie, you don't know good coffee. Well, they're wrong. There's only one brew that gets my seal of approval. Deadly Grounds coffee is my guilty pleasure. The aroma is so intoxicating. It brings all of my neighbors out of the woodwork. Deadly Grounds coffee. Coffee to die for and zombie approved. It's good to get a little deadly. Use the front door! Oh, they're so disgusting.
The Dorkening and all affiliated shows are not intended for anyone under the age of 18. The following may contain discussions or scenes that have adult situations, graphic violence, nudity, strong sexual content, and graphic language. This show is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised.
Okay, welcome back to Unprinted Pages for Take 2!
That was epic.
This time I know it's live!
That's the first time ever, and literally almost a year of the Elliott Network that we've ever just launched into a show. We were like 10 minutes into the show easily, and we weren't streaming. That was momentous occasion.
That was funny as hell.
It was. It really was.
I feel like I face planted in front of the entire school again. Well, let's try this again. Welcome back to Unprinted Pages. We are having a special episode tonight. We're having the Fae Propaganda release party. Woo-hoo! And we have some amazing authors. 6 of the authors from the Fae Propaganda anthology. We have Rasty Slasher.
Dr. Rasty Slasher.
Okay, the doctor is me, Dr. Rasty Slasher. Welcome to the show. We have Michael Guzman.
Good evening, everybody.
I have loved his work since his Shaman Boy story. We have Ronald W. Gillespie Jr. Welcome to the show,
doctor,
Ronald.
but I like to play doctor. Does that count?
And then we have Patricia Harris and Serena Mossgraves.
One and
welcome
both.
to the show. Okay. Was it hard to write a fairy story, Raz?
No, because I like turtles.
That is my wife.
I'm super into Fae lore and mythology. I always have been. I also play a lot of D&D. So to me, like the whole, I've always been drawn to sort of that magic side of things in the fantasy era genre. Not era. Can't talk now. See, we do a take 2, and now I'm fucking up all across the board. It's a lot of fun for me to revisit that because in take 1, I was talking about how I had written the story 3 years ago involving a blind girl, a red cap, and an apartment building, and that was a really fun one. And I also just realized that I'm doing Fae lore as well. I did another one because I had a changeling in the background of a story, the Tales for Adventure, Looking for Adventure anthology. Calls from the Void. Click Calls from the Void.
Yes.
This is my Seth Redlock story that I'm turning into a whole thing soon. So I guess I've been writing a lot more Fae than I realized. So it's always fun to kind of sit down with that.
Both of those were great stories. What about you, Mike?
Well, this particular story wasn't too hard because I kind of had a head start on this one. I wrote the first half, like maybe last year, year before, for one of the other anthologies, but I couldn't make the deadline in time since work got really hectic. I think it was Faerie Playground or something like that was one of the ones I missed out on. But I'm keeping this story in the back of my head at least and halfway written, just in case another anthology shows up that would be appropriate for it. So this one came out. I'm like, okay, now I can finish this story, and turned out better than I thought.
What about you, Ron?
Well, keep in mind that I don't really know how to read. I promptly forgot how to read once I graduated college because I got my bachelor's degree in creative writing, and I had to read a lot of literature while I was in college to do a creative writing degree. And I got so burnt out on reading that I promptly stopped reading as soon as I graduated. Therefore, leading into this, I have not read a lot of literature about fairies. Don't really know all that much about them. I would say the amount of fairies I know would be related to Tinkerbell from Peter Pan. Whatever that gets you as far as fairy knowledge goes. However, in the vein of writing horror, yeah, I'm not so sure how that relates, the whole fairy thing or fairy mythology or anything like that. So, yeah, for me, it was a little difficult to write a fairy based story. However, I'm laying in bed one night and I remembered something that had happened to me many years ago, several years ago, probably about 10 years ago. And I went, huh. How can I turn this into a story? And I think I even asked in the chat, like, how could I set this up to make this into a story? I don't recall if anybody ever actually answered the question, but I played around with it and thought, how can I turn this into a story? And next thing you know, I came up with the brothers, Rafe and Arlo Arrington, who were in danger of losing their estate and thought they would try to find themselves a fairy that they could make a wish in order to save their estate, and that's how the story came about. But it is actually inspired by a true event.
That is awesome. What about you, Patty?
Well, Patricia writes poetry. I believe the only thing in there from Patricia was poetry. But Serena loves writing retellings of fairy tales. So for me, it's kind of one of those, it's fun. And especially dark retelling. And this was not my normal. I was going with a little bit lighter. I actually was trying to do a take on Edgar Allan Poe with it. It was me taking the Mask of the Red Death and seeing what I could do with it. And I couldn't help sticking Fae Corps right dead in the middle of it. So there is, if anybody's looking, an Easter egg where Fae Corps is mentioned in Serena's story.
You could tell from my question that I found it, couldn't you? Okay, for me, I'd never written a fairy story this long. It's usually like a few lines for a little kid play, and because that's what I would do with the kids thanks to Tinkerbell. And this time I really wanted to be part of the anthology. So it started with a snippet from a Fae romance book. And then I'm like, ooh, I like that. But I want to make it something I can do. The book was awesome, but I'm hoping my story is good too. I guess the next question I want to ask, unless you guys have a question for the other authors. Do you guys have a question for each other about this anthology?
I don't know how to read, so I'm not sure what to ask.
Okay, I have a question. What was the most fun part about being in one of the Fae Corps anthologies? Both Mike and Raz, and also you, Jenny, you've been in multiple of these now. Is there something that stands out to each of you as being, this is something that is the best part of it? This is something that you enjoy about being in one of these.
Who would you like to start?
I
Patty?
like. Okay.
I guess go ahead, Mike.
Seems like Mike's willing to go first. So.
Sorry. As for me, I like the fact that start off with just Patty and then eventually Jenny, like just the confidence to help bring out in me that, like, yes, somebody who's never taken formal creative writing classes that just originally wrote fanfics for fun and stuff can like write original stories and get them published, and people will like them. And we're also forming a community of people that support each other. I love it.
Raz?
Well, I was just looking it up. This is the 12th one I've done with you now, officially. The process hasn't changed. I'm going to be honest, but I'm saying this in a very good way. I mean, yeah, some of the wordings might have changed in like agreements or certain things like behind the scenes, but since the first one, it's been easy because we get a clear out layout of what's going on. We know the theme ahead of time. We get all the artwork and all the everything handed to us. It comes down to us, like Mike said, building the community and being responsible for cheering each other on and being there for each other. But you make it easy to market for us because you create all the images, and then it's up to us to go out there and let everybody we know about it and get passionate about it, like out in public, and kind of get it out there. And we're relying on each other in that community to do that advertising for all of us and to really get in there. And we've had a lot of success with that, I think, and we've reached a lot of interesting markets. The books have gone into a lot of really cool places. But knowing that as a writer, I can come in and just hand you a story and do some promotion after, it takes a lot of the guesswork out of the process. And then if we do happen to have a question, I've seen you explain like 50,000 things to a person that had never done it before. So even looking at it for watching someone new come into it, it's just easy. It's all right there. And I've done anthologies with other people that were definitely not as easy as this. Not nearly as easy as this process. So I mean, if you're looking into writing, short stories that you want to get included, I'd say pay attention to the Fae Corps page. Like, look for open submissions, because not only is it a great place to start, it's a great place to stick around and stay with.
And your thoughts, Jenny?
You are muted, Jenny.
Thank you. You were willing to take where I was at my writing and help me get better. You didn't tell me, come back when you become a better writer. You said, okay, I'll help you be a better writer. I'll help you get to where you can do this better. And I started finding an amazing community that I could talk to. I've loved Fae Corps and one of the best things that I've ever happened for a convention. And I started out writing like Mike, shoot, the word escaped my mind. Fan fiction of Yu Yu Hakusho, and now I am here writing in my own fairy stories and my own haunted house stories. And someone wants my haunted house stories, and that part right there makes me happy.
If out of all of the stories that you have ever written, you could go into any of them. And yes, Ron, I'm including you in this one because I know this is your first anthology, but you did just release a book of stories with Fae Corps. If out of all of them you could go into any of them, which one would you go into? I'm going to start with Ron because I want to know his answer, and he didn't really have one for the last one.
If I could go into any anthology, is that what you're asking?
Any of your stories, anything that you have personally written.
If I could be a character in any of my stories, which one would I go into? Wow, that's a tough one since I write horror where people die horrific deaths and it's very gory. I'm not entirely certain I would want to be a character in any of my stories. That being said, however, I have an idea that's been percolating in my mind for a while on something that I want to write that I think, if any of them, that would probably be the one that I would want to be a character in it. I don't want to give too much away about it because I haven't even started writing the story, but it is, it's about a man who, his mother was a witch. She tried to do a ritual to bring her or to communicate with her husband across the afterlife and inadvertently summoned a demon, which a greater wizard, sorcerer, head of the coven, bound into the mother's baby. And he grew up with this demon bound inside of him, which allows him special powers and demon sight, things like that. But he's a perfectly normal person, just not possessed because he has free communication with this demon. And there's a lot more to it, but I don't want to go into detail. But I have this whole idea for a story in my head. And it's something that I'm actually thinking about making into a series, as long as I can come up with enough storylines and plots to make that happen. But yeah, I think that would be the one that I would go into. And if I can, Patty, I'd like to get back to your first question, which you asked Mike and Raz and Jenny about what's your favorite part of it. And for me, it's the opportunity. I know that I just published a book back in February, and being or participating in these anthologies that we have coming up with Fae Propaganda, Allight Menagerie, and the one that's coming up in the fall. For me, that's exciting because it allows me opportunity to write things or to come up with ideas, write things for these anthologies that I would never have had the opportunity to do before because I didn't know about them. So it's a way for me to be prolific as an author and to keep putting stuff out there to stay relevant while I'm working on my next big project. So for that, I have to say thank you. And I have to say thank you to Raz for introducing me to Fae Corps Publishing because it really has been like a family. We all communicate with each other in group chat and getting to know everybody. And that's exciting. It makes me inspired to want to keep writing and to be a part of it. So I have to say thank you for that.
And I just want to say in response to that, man, like, you and I didn't know each other like a super long time before you joined the network and before we started talking about that. But like, when I first met you at the OHA meeting we had, I mean, that was the first time technically that I met you, and then like reconnecting with you again through the haunt world. The first thing I realized about you is that you like to tell stories, and you're good at it. Like, even just like, oh, I did this the other day. Like, it's the way you talked and described things, man. And I was just like, and that was before I even knew you had a degree in creative writing. Before I even knew that about you, I was just like, this guy's a writer. I know it. I fucking know it. So thank you for sharing your stories with me, dude, because I've loved everything you put out.
Well, if I can,
I do own your book.
Refresh your memory, Raz, on the first chat that we had online for the Haunter check-in, you said that you wanted to gather a bunch of stories from some haunt actors about the backstories for their characters and combine them all into a book.
Yep.
And we have not done that yet. So
not yet. Well, to be fair, a lot of the people that were interested never said. You were the only one. You and Pyle actually were the only ones. And then Angela said, yeah, but then she, everything that's been going on with Carnage and stuff, kind of, trying to let some things settle. But I definitely still want to do that, man. I think we definitely need to still do a Haunter book, like fucking just cool fiction stories. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
I think so. I'm excited about that. And, this is the thing about being a writer is you always got ideas on the back burner of stuff that you want to do. And it's just a matter of finding time that you can actually work on it and get it done.
That's true.
And honestly, I'm glad that he did introduce me to you. I have had a wonderful time with your book. It has not been, it has not been a bad thing. And I look forward to what I see come out of you. The story you just mentioned sounds like that's going to be a whole lot of fun. Mike, what about you? If you could go into any story you've written, which one would it be?
That is a toughie, because if I was to go into any of my stories, it'd probably be one of my more lighthearted ones, just because, I've written, just like Ron said, like, I've written some horror stories where some bad things happened, but I've also written some more lighthearted ones, and out of those, I think probably the one I wrote before this one for the romance anthology. That one, although it was challenging to write, it was a little more lighthearted, had happy ever after kind of ending in a way. I don't want to give it away for those who haven't read it, but in the end, it's just about someone who's been in a extremely long-term relationship, yet still has all the passion and love for his partner that he's had since he met her, whether it's yesterday or 100 years ago. And I thought I really liked that, and I hope everybody can have that kind of relationship.
Yeah, I'm still looking.
Raz, what about you?
All of them. That's the easiest question you could ever ask me, because every fucking thing I write takes place in the same world. It's Riverside, Ohio, or around it, and that's where I was born and raised. So I lived that. I lived a lot of the side events and the background events that happened. All those things. Those were all real things. A lot of the people, right down to their names, the spellings, and everything, are real people that really have those personalities and like that kind of music, etc., etc. So I just turned the real into surreal, I guess, in a way, in my own neurodivergent way. So, and I still live in that world, because the haunt is 5 minutes down the street. Actually, if I walk to the other side of the parking lot, I'm in Riverside. The side of the parking lot that we're in is Dayton. So it's, I basically still work in Riverside.
So does this mean we have a Dr. Slasher shared universe? All the
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's a 100%. It's the Riverside universe. Yeah, it's all one thing, man. It's
Okay,
weird. Like, I think I have a couple stories that technically take place outside of Riverside, but there's tie-ins. One happens in a completely different state, But that's one that I'll talk about later. It's connected to a different place, but even it has ties into Riverside characters.
Jenny, I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, but I'm curious.
The day after we laid her to rest would be the one I would like to go to. It's based on a time period of my life I'll never be able to go back to. I can't even go back to the house because it burnt down. I would love to go see the people one more time. A lot of them have passed away. That some of those characters are based on. Yeah, I'd choose that one. And I'm very sad now. I just found out this is the last of my Deadly Grounds cold brew.
Aww.
You can order more.
It's not like they're a sponsor,
Order
right?
more, but yeah, but I figured I'd remind people to make their own iced coffee with Deadly Grounds. It's easy.
Yeah.
But anyway, now that I said, hey, talk about one of our sponsors, let's continue. Any other questions, Patty?
No, but I think I'd like to answer my own. If I actually were to go, if I were actually to go into any of the stories, for Patty, it's easy. The sugar stories are my own. They are the life I've lived. The Where Sugar, because they were the stories I wrote about my daughter and her escapades when she was growing up. So those, that's me. Going back would be just going back to her as a baby. As Serena, though, I would love to go into the world where the junkyard zombie is set, because I would absolutely love to go zombie killing. And I guess that's a weird thing, but it was a fun story. And it was a fun game. You got that right, Mike.
Double tap.
I got one question. What story did you think I was going to say, Patty?
I expected you to say Friday. I expected you to say the one with Friday.
I love Friday, but most of that was nightmares I literally woke up in the middle of the night having, or
Those are some of the
part of
best
us
stories.
actually went through. I don't want to do that again.
What do you think my book is about?
Well, so is mine. I just didn't call it nightmares.
That's a weird subjective thing, nightmares, because like all the crazy fucked up shit, I love that because I can control dreams like to a degree. Like anybody can do this. I mean, just pay attention, like realize when that guy's about to stab me. Yeah, that's not fucking real, and then you can have fun with things. But it's like the real thing. It's the real life stuff that other people would dream about and not even think about that freak me the fuck out.
Yes, Patty?
I can't control the dreams. Unfortunately, the PTSD, the dreams control me, and it's not a fun thing. So I envy you.
I'll teach you, man.
I know for a fact Friday, how Friday is. It's hurts. But anyway. Okay. Who would like to do the first reading?
Oh, we're doing readings?
Yeah. I'll volunteer as tribute. I don't mind.
What are we reading?
Okay. You volunteer as tribute. Your fairy story?
Yeah, the story we put in.
Oh, okay.
People want to hear the audio, so they'll go buy the written version too. You gotta have both.
Okay, yeah.
I have used your videos for commercials, so yeah. Okay, here you go, Raph.
My story is called Wishful Thinking. And that is the right story, right? I'm correct? Just want to make sure I'm not accidentally reading something wrong. All right, cool.
Yes, that is the right story.
Okay, I was pretty damn sure. I just, you know how I am sometimes. All right. Wishful thinking. The first guest would arrive in 44 minutes, and I was sitting in my bedroom closet, alone, in the dark. I took a deep breath and struck the match. I watched it burn for a moment, steeling my nerves before lighting the wick of the orange pillar candle in the center of the floor. Then I glanced at the reflection in the full-length mirror leaning against the wall in front of me. It was now or never. The next step was the one I was least looking forward to. I had never done well at the sight of blood, especially my own. Before I could think about it any further and chicken out or something, I grabbed the X-Acto knife sitting next to me and quickly jabbed the sharp tip into the index finger of my left hand. I would pass right the fuck out if I saw so much as a drop of blood. So I wrapped that piece of cloth around it and pressed it firmly. When I was sure I was in the clear, I pulled away the cloth and I slid it under the ugly-ass orange candle. Out of sight, out of mind. I double-checked to make sure everything was in order before I continued. Everything had to be perfect. If so much as a sugar cube in the bowl in front of the mirror was out of place, I'd die. At least, that's what I've been led to believe. As far as I could tell, everything looked how it was supposed to. I'd follow the instructions to the letter. Content with that knowledge, I closed my eyes and I chanted the words I've been memorizing for the last few weeks. As for the instructions, I spoke them exactly 4 times. I call upon the stories old, desired ones of warmth and cold. With this gift I summon thee to take part in my revelry. Now I just had to stare at my reflection in the mirror for 4 solid minutes, in silence, before I could make my wish. Do you have any idea how long 4 minutes is? I do. Yeah, it's an eternity. A lot of things could still go wrong at this point. There are a lot of weird contingency plans in the ritual instructions I found on Reddit. They were supposed to help you avoid negative outcomes, but they weren't always clear. Most of those instructions only worked in the earlier stages of the ritual. They would tell you how to end the ritual in the event you couldn't light the candle in 4 tries, or if you saw a reflection in the mirror that wasn't your own, weird, trivial shit like that. They were supposed to be signs you were in danger, or maybe they just didn't want to hang out and be bothered by a couple of people in dark closets. I don't know. I can't say I blame them. When my 4 minutes were up, I pulled out my iPhone and popped into my notes. I had gone to great lengths to craft it carefully and eliminate any loopholes they could use against me. They loved twisting your words around and turning your hopes and dreams into a shit show. So you had to be specific about the way you worded your wishes. I guess if I were that powerful and had nothing better to do, I'd fuck with people too. You had to pass the time somehow. I took a deep breath and voiced my wish. I wish for Jacob Myers of 2315 Bushnell Avenue in Riverside, Ohio, to suffer and survive a career-ending injury tonight. Was taking away the thing Jacob loved more than anything else petty? Maybe. It depends on how you look at it. I knew better than to go out with him. Really, I did. There was just something about him. He was the kind of guy that could lie through his teeth and you'd just smile, nod, and you'd accept it as the gospel. He had a cult leader kind of charisma. When he asked me out at the beginning of summer, I was mostly just shocked that he even knew my name. I was nervous, but he told me he loved me, and I was the only one for him. He told me that everything I never even knew I wanted to hear, he was my first, my second, my third. We did it all summer, okay? Don't judge me. A week before school started, I found out there were 5 of us. 5 girls that he had strung along who worshipped the ground he walked on, and we were all the ones for him. It was when I found out that set this whole plan into motion. Kara was the first to realize what was going on, and she did not take it well. She outed all of it on Snap and tagged us in it. She tried to kill herself that same night, but her dad found her and got her to the hospital in time. It was the whole thing. Since then, the 5 of us started hanging out. It kind of started as a support group, but after a month, it became something else entirely. 2 weeks ago, we began officially plotting our collective revenge. The only actual rule was that it had to be something he would survive. He needed to suffer for what he did. Kara found the ritual in some subreddit dedicated to paranormal games and convinced us all that it would work. The guy who posted it claimed to be an expert on Celtic lore, so we figured it was legit. I volunteered to be the one to try it out. I didn't believe any of this bullshit anyway. To be honest, the thought of it was kind of empowering. Even if nothing happened, I felt like I was taking back the weird power he had over me. We all were. Something rustled just behind me. By the time I looked back, there was nothing there. I ignored it and turned back to face the mirror and finish the ritual. I noticed the cloth with my blood on it was missing, and the bowl of sugar cubes was empty. Weird, but whatever. Before I could process any of that, my reflection shifted in the mirror. It was still my face, but I had no control over it. It grinned at me with a chilling level of sadistic satisfaction and said only one word before the candle went out and darkness consumed me. Granted. I felt heaviness in my chest. Of all the outcomes I expected, this had not been one of them. This party was about to get a lot more interesting. The other girls knew not to show up early, and I doubted any of the guests would. I had to admit the first person exactly 44 minutes from when I started the ritual. Before now, I'd always thought the magic number was 3. Either I was wrong or, I don't know, maybe the fairies didn't get the memo. My thoughts turned back to that asshat Jacob. Not all of us had been wined and dined by him or had that magical summer fling we thought would never end. Actually, it seemed like only Kate and I had gotten the whole boyfriend experience. For Beth and Charlotte, it was just a one-night stand. More of a booty call, really. There'd been a promise to call in the morning, but Jacob wasn't so good on follow-through. It took some time before Carrie felt comfortable enough to fill us in on her particular tragedy. She'd been dosed at a rager and passed out. The next thing she knew, Jacob had half her clothes off and was going to town on her in some random room at the evening's party house. I know all the details, but I'm not going to go into any more than that. There's some things you just don't write. After that, she was threatened to keep her mouth shut by some of the cheerleading squad. That made me wonder how deep all of this went. The other guys on the team definitely knew about all this too. Based on the various responses to Kira's snaps, it seemed like probably almost half the school knew about it. What about the coaches, the teachers? And Riverside football seems to be more important than local politics. Was everyone just trying to cover up for their QB hero? The whole thing makes me sick to my stomach. I'd gone so deep into thought I'd lost track of time. I'd have probably zoned out for a while longer if the doorbell hadn't rung. In a panic, I yanked myself out of my pocket, just in time to check as I ran to the door. I'd come this far, and I had no intention of fucking this all up now. I sighed in relief. Seeing I still had 2 minutes, I glanced through the window, and the door confirmed it was my girls. I was greeted with haunted eyes and stoic nods. I waited until that 44-minute mark on the dot, and I let them inside. After assuring them multiple times that everything was good to go, a nervous energy took over the room. We all just sort of sat around in silence and waited for people to show up. And half an hour felt like yet another eternity. I'd expected this, though. No one worth partying with ever really showed up on time, and we'd only invited the kind of people that understood the unwritten rules, the kind of people that needed to be taught a lesson or two. Jacob was the last person to show up, of course, around an hour into the party. Well, the people I recognized anyway. Another 5 people came in after he did. None of them were familiar to me or any of the girls, but each gave me an exaggerated wink when I let them in. I can't even probably describe any of them. They looked so different from everyone else, or maybe they just felt different. Even that's hard for me to explain now. They felt on the party like social piranhas, immediately capturing the attention of scattered cliques. Within minutes, they were telling stories, singing songs, juggling, dancing. I'd never seen anything like it. None of us had. It was Kira that recognized the Fae for what they were and pulled us in. I didn't think they'd come in person, but here they are. Keep your distance unless they approach. Remember, remain polite and thankful, but whatever you do, don't accept anything from them. I think we're probably in the clear here, but let's play it safe, Naomi explained. She was mostly just reminding us of what we'd learned about the Fae when we first started planning all this. Naomi insisted upon the research, just in case. She's right, though. None of us expected them to actually show up. Maybe we just hoped they wouldn't, or, I don't know, they just somehow work their magic from afar. We were so naive. For a while, everything seemed like it was going as planned. People were dancing, drinking, and doing most of the things you'd expect based on decades worth of shows and movies about underage parties. Well, the good ones anyway. Most of them are just awkward get-togethers where we sit on our phones and text each other while eating pizza and wait for someone else to get the good times rolling. Spoiler alert, they almost never do. This one, though, it was definitely a rager, and we all knew the drill. The more reliable among us took shifts keeping an eye out for the cops. My house was kind of remote, though, our nearest neighbor a few miles off. Still, it was better to be on the safe side with things like this. Me and the girls scattered ourselves among the guests to keep an eye on things. We each made small talk and put in our appearances throughout the cliques. We cycled throughout the entire house, only to do it all over again, giving one another a knowing look when our paths crossed. My house is pretty huge, so the cycle can take a little while. On my third cycle, Jacob cornered me on my way out of the first floor bathrooms by the laundry room. I knew this would happen at some point. It was something we'd all prepared ourselves for. "Hey, Abs," Jacob all but screamed over the music. It was one of those embarrassing moments when you're screaming over the music and it stops halfway through between songs. I don't think he noticed, though. And if he did, he didn't care. Jacob wasn't the kind of guy that felt things like embarrassment. He'd always acted like he was above all the things us commoners had to deal with. Typical douche bro behavior. "Oh, hey, Jacob," I replied, trying to keep my cool. "I'm glad I ran into you, Abs. We should talk," he said and gently grabbed my hand. He led me into the laundry room before I could even react. Between those bright blue eyes, his dimples, the use of his nickname for me, and the touch of his skin, I was powerless. I snapped out of it at the sound of the door shutting and locking behind us. The number one rule the girls and I had made was that none of us would end up in a room alone with him at the party. If you found yourself in that situation, because we all knew the power he held over us, you were supposed to message the chat group so someone could come and save you. Before he turned to face me, my phone was in my hands. I just sent the 911 text to the girls by the time our eyes met. He carefully took the phone from me and set it on the dryer. It wasn't like he jerked it out of my hands or anything like that. He had that way of making you feel like it was what you wanted, like it was your idea. That having his full attention was more important than anything else in the universe. "I know what you're up to, Abs. And I'm a little hurt if I'm being honest. Did our love mean nothing to you?" His words seemed slow and far away, like I was hearing them underwater. How could he know what I did? What we did? "Come on, Abs. You weren't exactly subtle about it. Not once have you ever thrown a party, and suddenly you invite everyone over that's on or connected to the team. I thought you were smarter than that," he said, disappointment tainting his voice. I glanced at my phone on where he'd set it on the dryer. "It won't do you any good, for them, or you, for that matter," he revealed, a sickly grin ruining his beautiful face. "What do you mean? What did you do, Jacob?" I could barely choke the words out. "They're busy, just like you are. The second we realized that something was going on, we made a plan of our own," he said. He came closer, pressing me back against the wall. Just as I started to struggle and call out for help, he slapped me. Just like that. I was stunned. "Oh, shut the fuck up, Abs. No one really cares about any of you. How did you think this was going to play out, huh? You'd reveal us all as assholes and somehow everything would be right with your little world? Everyone here knows what happened. You think there's only 5 of you? There are dozens, Abs. Dozens. Hell, maybe more. I've never had to do math in my entire life," he said, and slapped me again for good measure. The door handle rattled, like someone was trying to rip it open. Then someone started banging on the door. I took advantage of the distraction and did what my parents had always told me to do in a situation like this. I kicked him right in the balls. Not a pathetic little kick either. I reared back my foot and I shoved it forward right into his cash and prizes like I was going for a field goal. I turned to run for the door as Jacob fell to one knee, but somehow he grabbed me by the ponytail and yanked me down with him. He came down right onto my throat with his other knee, holding me down and choking me at the same time, and he held me there, coughing and screaming about something I couldn't even understand. Even the banging on the door was fading along with my vision. Suddenly the door exploded, and I could breathe again. I was confused at first. Pieces of the door were still raining down everywhere, and I could hear Jacob screaming bloody murder. The next thing I knew, this Gordage cottagecore girl with the most beautiful green eyes I'd ever seen was helping me up and asking me if I was okay. Yeah, I guess, I stuttered. I'd love to lie and tell you I stuttered like a moron because I was still in shock, but I don't think it was that at all. I'm totally straight, just an FYI, but hot damn, she took my breath away. I shook it off when I remembered what Jacob said about the girls. "We have to help them. They're doing something to my friends," I shouted and made a mad dash to the door frame, whatever was left of the fucking door anyway. I got maybe 3 steps from her and stopped. She placed a hand on my shoulder. Suddenly, I was just calm. Like dead calm. I couldn't help but feel like everything was going to be okay. No, that everything was okay. Then she spoke. "Your friends are waiting for you. Everyone," is waiting for you. Her soothing voice all but sang the words. She took my hand and squeezed it gently. That feeling of comfort grew stronger. I let her lead me to the great room where most of the party had been when I'd headed to the bathroom forever ago. Music still played, but the scene before me was one out of a nightmare. I'll try to explain it the best I can. So half the people there were eating and drinking. By that, I mean a gluttonous act where they were putting liquids and solids alike down their throats, whether or not it fit. They were choking as they crammed it in, vomiting it up, and doing it all over again. A few of them were shirtless, and you could actually see how swollen their stomachs were becoming, like they'd burst at any second. Just about everyone else was dancing, and when I say dancing, I mean they were running around and spasming to the music. They screamed almost in unison as their shoes tore and their feet split. They left bloody footprints all over Mom's white carpet, unable to keep themselves from moving. Despite everything, I wanted to feel sorry for them. Another gentle squeeze of my hand told me that everything was okay. I can't explain it now, but again, that's just how it felt. I was watching people literally party themselves to death, and I just stood there, and I watched it like it was Outer Banks. She took me to my girls, and we stood there together, each of us holding the hand of someone I didn't recognize. The Fae. I remember Kira saying earlier. 5 others slipped into the room, dragging people behind them. They let out Jacob and 4 of his teammates in the middle of the room. Be still, children, the woman holding my hand said calmly, yet somehow loud enough for everyone to hear. Within seconds, everything and everyone was still and silent. You never cease to amaze me. For centuries, we have watched you grow and menace the world around you. We watched you crawl from the darkness of our forests, and secretly, we hoped you would make us proud, like all parents hope for their children. While some among you are an exception. She turned to me and the girls, gracing us with her kind smile for a moment before continuing. The rest of you are gluttonous pigs that have forgotten the lessons you learned so long ago. No more shall we sit idly by and watch you destroy the world that was given to you. No more shall we watch your chaos destroy the innocence and the kindness with the nose that truly deserve better. She said, no emotion in her sing-song voice. The 5 Fae released our hands and stood together in front of us, looking at everyone gathered before them. We held each other's hands instead and stood in a row of our own behind them. Something about that just felt right. Let this be a warning to all of you, to all of your kind, she said before they descended upon Jacob and his friends on the floor before them. Their fingers elongated into talons, tearing into the shoulders of their victims. They tore the flesh that covered the brachial plexus and played their nerves like banjos before shredding them as the boys shrieked and begged them to stop. There was no emotion in this for them. It was like watching the lady at the dry cleaners fold people's clothes. It was just a job that had to be done, just as it had been a million times before and would be done a million times more. Really the only way I could explain it. When they were done, everyone came to their senses all at once. Our guests started screaming and nursing their own injuries. They flooded out through the front door, trampling each other in a panic. Hell, those that couldn't walk drugged themselves out or were carried by friends. Jacob and his cronies included, or what was left of them. Before long, it was just us and the Fae. Well, ladies, I hope it was everything you wished for. If you need us again, you know how to reach us. She winked, her green eyes twinkling, and just like that, they left, and they left us there to clean up the mess we'd made for ourselves. The cops showed up a few hours after that. Blood and all kinds of gross shit was everywhere, and there we were, just sitting on the floor, holding hands in shock. More than half of our guests, and I use that term lightly, guests were hospitalized. No one, my girls included, remember what happened, only that it had happened at the party. They held us for questioning, but once lawyers got involved, it was all over from there. The official story, and the one the news outlets had a field day with, was a party gone wrong. We were the modern-day reefer madness, a shining example of everything that could go wrong when teens let loose with drug-crazed abandon. I pretend not to remember what happened that night, but the truth is, I'll never forget it. Every time I look into a mirror, and hello, I'm a teenager, the mirror is life, I am reminded. My face that's not my face grins and it winks at me, and I swear I can see the reflection of her face in my eyes. And that's it.
I still think that's a beautiful story.
Thank you.
I loved it.
So this was someone else's idea for a story that I wrote. The original version of this happened right after I did the first anthology with you, and it was an idea that Michelle had, where she wanted me to do a Fae story with sort of a. She had the concept of the girls, where something had happened to all of them with a guy and the football team and the town being in on it. And at the time, I also really wanted to do a story about paranormal games. Like that's kind of. So I just took what I wanted to do with her whole concept, and Fae included, because her and I both love Fae. Just it kind of came together, and I think the most fun for me was actually creating the paranormal game, because in the story it just talks about her playing it. I actually created an entire actual full-on postable paranormal game that goes with this story somewhere on my hard drive, but I used that as the basis for her to describe the steps. But it was a lot of fun doing that, like taking a really good concept from someone that that's not necessarily a writer, and making their concept come to life in your own like way and style. So it's kind of like an exercise of something I'd never done to do. So like this story definitely means a lot to me because of that.
I love how you mix creepypasta and Fae.
Yep. I actually took our paranormal games. The Reddit section for that was, but that and creepypasta are definitely my influences here, and of course Michelle, who I did dedicate the story to in the book.
Oh yeah, and I appreciate it. So, who would like to go next?
There we go. I think I'll go next.
Okay.
With everybody.
Go right ahead, and if you'll tell us something about the inspiration for the story as well.
Inspiration? Honestly, parts of my own childhood were weaved into this. Like small childhood fantasy combined with like how I used to be when I was like kindergarten to first grade type person. So I might talk about it more after the story. This one's called the Moonwater Gate. It was a beautiful place. There was a large pond surrounded by a lovely garden. The sound of children's laughter was all around her. Though it was night time, the place shined brightly with a blue glow all around. She looked up to see where the light was coming from, but a loud voice pierced its way through. Sarah, Sarah, wake up, dear. The voice of her mother woke Sarah up from her dream. She sat straight up in her car seat, rubbing her eyes. We're almost there now. You're going to love this. You missed most of the trip, though. Maybe you can see more on the way home next week, her father chimed in. Sorry, Daddy, Sarah said in a sing-song voice. Don't worry about it. I know what long car rides do to you, her father let out a good-natured chuckle. There it is on the left. He pointed out the window with one hand as he kept his other on the steering wheel. There was a large hill, covered in luscious grass with a long gravel trail running down it, and a rather large house at the top. Sarah's father slowed down the car and turned into the driveway. Sarah grinned at hearing the crunch of the gravel beneath the tires. A new experience for the girl who lived in New York. Excited to see Grandma? Sarah's mother asked with a smile. Haven't seen her since your birthday. That was a whole half a year, Sarah chimed in. You're also going to meet your cousins, her father added, for the first time. They're close to your age, though, so I hope you can be friends with them. I don't know about that, Sarah said sadly. What if it's like school? Sarah's parents frowned. Their hearts went out to their child, knowing she had a hard time this past year in kindergarten making friends with her classmates. It won't be. This isn't school, it's Grandma's house. It's always fun, her mother said with a little extra enthusiasm she hoped would catch. And they're your cousins. I'm sure they'll like you, her father added. Here we are. He smiled as he pulled up to his mother-in-law's carport, pulling the parking brake as there was still an incline, and shutting the engine off. Soon after, a screen door popped open and a woman walked out faster than her age suggested. The lines on her face looked as if they were as much from smiling often as from passing middle age. You're here! You're here! She called out excitedly. Grandma! Sarah called out to her, bouncing in her car seat. Calm down, silly. Let us get you out of your car seat first, Sarah's mother laughed, as she and her husband undid their seatbelts and unlocked the doors. I can do that myself now, Sarah insisted, unbuckling her own seat. You'll still have to wait for me to open your door, though, her dad said, grateful to whomever invented child safety locks. As soon as he did, though, Sarah shot off like a rocket towards her grandmother, who bent down to her level with open arms, laughing as Sarah collided and hugged her at once. Take it easy on your grandmother, Sarah's mom chided. Oh, it's all right, Sarah's grandmother laughed, getting up and picking up Sarah as she did so. She's getting so big, there'll be a day when I can't do this with her. Never, Sarah insisted. I'll never grow up, just like Peter Pan. Peter Pan, huh? That's one of my favorite stories too, her grandmother replied. Did you know it's even older than the movie? Wow, that is old, Sarah exclaimed. Older than me, her grandmother winked, causing the little girl to gasp in surprise. I have the book. I can read it to you after dinner tonight, she offered. Sarah shook her head rapidly. Did you want a snack? I bet you're hungry after the long trip, and dinner's not for another 3 hours. Can I? She looked to her parents. Well, since we're on vacation, her father pretended to look off in thought. Please? Sarah asked, clasping her hands together. Okay, her father replied. Come on in. Your mom can help with the snacks while your dad brings your things in, her grandmother said. A few moments later, the kitchen at grandmother's table had a plate in the center with a half-dozen half sandwiches circling it, and some juice for Sarah and coffee for the adults. Glad you guys made it safe. Will you be staying the night, or will you start off the rest of your trip after dinner? Grandmother asked. We didn't want to impose, so she had Sarah and her cousins over for the week. We have a hotel for tonight before starting off tomorrow morning, Sarah's father explained. Have they arrived yet? Sarah's mother asked. They should be here closer to dinner, grandmother replied. You'll love them, Sarah, she smiled. I don't know. Sarah looked down at her feet before taking a sip of her drink. She's a little nervous, her father whispered. It's okay to be a little nervous when meeting new people, grandmother replied. I was a shy kid, too. Really? Sarah asked. Yeah, I know your teachers probably expect you to be friends with your whole class, but it's not as easy as they say it is. You just need to meet the right kind of people first. And my cousins are? Sarah asked. I hope so. They also seem to have trouble making friends. Maybe if you hang out together, you can also learn to make new friends when school starts back up after the summer. Okay, I'll try, Sarah sighed. May I be excused, please? Sure. I don't have much in the way of television, but I know you also like books, and I have plenty. Feel free to look around. I like to talk with your parents anyway, and I know grown-up stuff can be boring for kids, so go have fun, grandmother insisted. Sarah smiled, pushed herself off her chair, and headed to the living room of her grandmother's house. She noticed the bookshelf when they first entered the home and was eager to browse her collection. She saw some pretty thick and heavy books at the top rack, way out of her reach anyway, so she looked closer to her own eye level. She saw a few books they already read in school, so she didn't want to look at those again, but then several caught her eye. The works of Hans Christian Andersen, The Arabian Nights, Grimm's Fairy Tales, Peter Pan, Wizard of Oz. Sarah's eyes widened as to how many books actually came after that last one. I thought the movie was long, she gasped. Grandma promised to read Peter Pan later, so I'll pick another, she decided, picking up the collection of Hans Christian Andersen to read. She was getting engrossed in The Nightingale when there was a knock at the door. I'm coming, Sarah heard her grandmother call out. She and Sarah's parents all went to the door, and waiting were another couple with two kids in tow. A boy that looked close to Sarah's age and a girl that was younger than both of them. Sarah, come and meet your aunt and uncle and cousins, her father called out to her. Sarah put the book down and approached slowly as her parents exchanged hugs with her aunt and uncle. This is Aunt Dee and Uncle Robert, Sarah's mother introduced, and their kids are Mark and June. They're your cousins, she smiled. Nice to meet you. She held out her hand politely to her extended family. What a proper young lady. Uncle Robert smiled and shook her hand. Can I have hugs? Her aunt asked with a small smile. Okay. Sarah smiled and gave her aunt a small embrace. What's your name? June asked when Sarah pulled away from her aunt. Sarah, she smiled. What are you doing? The younger girl asked. Reading, Sarah replied. What are you reading? Mark asked. Come on, I'll show you. Sarah smiled eagerly and led her cousins to the bookshelf with the collections of fantasy and fairy tales she was browsing earlier. So many fairy tales, June grinned. I know, Sarah smiled back at her. Fairy tales? That stuff's for babies, Mark said with a sour note in his voice. Where are the good books? These are good books, Sarah insisted. How old are you anyway? Mark asked. 5.5, Sarah called back. I'm 7. Way too old for this stuff, and so are you. Why are you so mean? Sarah said, her eyes starting to water. It's because he's such a know-it-all. June stuck her tongue out at her older brother. Better than being a tag-along, Mark stuck his tongue out back. That's enough of that. You two have been arguing the whole trip. Can't you get along? Uncle Robert barked. You'll drive your grandmother crazy. Oh, it's all right, dear, grandmother said. I'm sure they're just tired from the drive, and a few days of fun here will get the grump out of them both. Oh, Grandma, Mark suddenly chimed in. I brought my telescope with me. Mom said there's no street lamps near here, so I hope I can see even more stars here than back home. What a lovely idea, Grandmother replied. We can do some stargazing after it gets dark. Just as long as you don't stay up too late, Uncle Robert reminded his son. But it's summer vacation, Mark protested, which means you get an extra hour. No more, Auntie replied firmly. Fine, Mark pouted. And remember to share with your sister and cousin, she added. What if they break it? Mark replied sourly. I'm not going to break it, June insisted. You just don't like sharing. The stars are for everyone to enjoy, Grandmother added, and I'll be there to make sure no one breaks your telescope, but you do have to share it. I guess that's fine, Mark conceded reluctantly. Now Sarah was looking at these books. Why don't you join her while the grown-ups catch up? Then we can have dinner, and then after your parents leave when it gets dark, we can go outside and look at the night sky, Grandmother said. With that, the adults left the room, leaving the kids to their own devices. I was reading this one, Sarah said, pointing at the still open book. What is it? June asked. It's the stories by the man who also wrote The Little Mermaid. I didn't know he wrote so many other stories. Sarah smiled with excitement as her cousin sat next to her and started to read. Baby stories, Mark grumbled before pulling a book out from his backpack. Really? And what book did you bring? Sarah asked, hands on her hips. Mark showed his sister and cousin the cover of A Beginner's Guide to Stargazing. This has real stuff in it like stars and planets, much cooler than make-believe things like fairies and dragons and stuff. It will help me figure out how to best use my telescope. With that, he turned his back on the girls and turned his attention to his own book. Is he always like this? Sarah asked June. All the time. Like I said, he's a know-it-all. I'm glad you're here, though. I think you're fun, June smiled. With that, the three children passed the time with their chosen books until it was time for dinner. Did you like the books? Grandmother asked. Very much, June smiled. Sarah and I read 3 whole stories together. That's wonderful, Auntie. Did you read them with Mark? I read my own book, Mark replied. Do you have any science books, Grandma? Yes, I don't like fairy tales. I have a few. They might be a bit too advanced at your age, though, Grandmother replied. No harm in letting him try, Uncle Robert replied. I'm glad he's taken an interest in science. Very grown up of you, son, he nodded in approval. Thanks, Dad, Mark grinned. After the summer, you'll be starting school, June. I hope you'll follow your brother's example and find something real to enjoy, he added. I enjoy stories, June said. Yes, well, Uncle Robert sighed. Dear, they're just kids still, and on vacation. Let them be kids, Auntie shouted, putting a gentle hand on her husband's shoulder. I think that stories are just as important as facts and figures personally, Grandmother said. Even if some of the ideas seem archaic, they can help develop a moral compass, and it's also important to just enjoy things once in a while. Well said, Sarah's mother nodded in approval. It's STEAM now, not just STEM, Sarah's father reminded Uncle Robert. The A for arts is just as important. I suppose, Uncle Robert said, realizing he was outnumbered on this issue at the moment. Even adults need to have fun once in a while, Grandmother added, smiling to her grandchildren. That's why you're staying here while they go do their own thing. So being grown up doesn't mean you never have fun again. Remember that. Yes, Grandma, all the children replied in a sing-song voice. After dinner, it was time for the parents to leave to go on their vacation. Hugs and kisses were exchanged as well as promises to behave for grandmother, and then they drove off. Well, kids, it's starting to get dark. Now, Mark, did you want to try to set up your telescope soon? She asked. Yes, please, Mark replied, sounding enthused for the first time since he arrived. With a small laugh, grandmother led the kids through her house to the back, which had a wide open yard with a pond and a couple hundred feet away. The only tree nearby was right next to the pond, and it had a tire swing attached to one of the larger limbs, and it looked like it could be used to swing and jump right off into the water. Grandmother had the kids bring a child-sized folding canvas chair on the way to set up their observation point. Wow, it's like you've got your own park, Sarah grinned and applauded as she looked over her grandmother's yard. I'm glad you like it, dear, grandmother smiled at her. You brought swimwear. I think you can go swimming tomorrow if you want, but not now. It's getting dark and it'll be too dangerous to try. Okay, Sarah nodded. The grandmother helped Mark set up his telescope as a full moon and a few stars started to show. Let's do the moon first, June suggested. I wanted to see craters. Okay, Mark pointed his prized gift at the moon and peered through. Grandma, can you help? He asked. Sure, dear. Grandmother peered through too and adjusted the various knobs to try to clear the image. But the moon was extra bright and refused to get into focus. That's odd. Is a full moon actually too bright for this telescope? She asked. Mark looked dejected. Maybe. I think my book said something about that. It's easier when it's not a full moon to pick up mountains and craters. Let's try looking at the planets and stars then, Grandma suggested. Ooh, Jupiter. Maybe we can see some of its moons. Can you point out which one is Jupiter? Grandmother asked, fully knowing the answer, but wanting Mark to be able to show his knowledge. After a few moments, they were able to get the planet into focus and saw 4 smaller dots surrounding the larger one. We did it, Mark exclaimed. Look at that, he told his sister and cousin. As June and Sarah looked through, they also grinned. Wow, that is so cool, June cheered. Very pretty, Sarah added. Now do you see why space is so cool? Mark asked. We never said it wasn't, Sarah pointed out. We can like this and like our fairy tales. There's no rule that says we couldn't. Very well said, Grandmother nodded. And sometimes the stars and planets are a big part of those kinds of stories. Let me tell you about one that isn't in the usual books. Ooh! Suddenly the kids sat in a circle with great interest, even Mark. Here's something my own grandmother once told me, Grandmother began. On a night like this, where the sky is clear and the moon is bright and full, you can find your way into the fairyland. Really? How? June asked. Look at the pond, Grandmother smiled. See the reflection of the moon on it? Yeah, Sarah nodded. Well, my grandmother said that if you jumped into the center of where the reflection of the moon was upon the water and swam as far down as you can, when you come up, you'll arrive in the world of the fairies. That sounds so cool, Sarah squealed. Can we try? She asked. No, I already said swimming at night is dangerous, Grandmother replied, starting to regret telling them this story. Besides, we should head back in soon. I know you can stay up later than usual, but it gets darker here than you're used to, so we should spend the rest of the night indoors. Oh, okay, Sarah looked down in disappointment. There's still plenty of books for you to read, Grandmother encouraged. We can go swimming tomorrow when it's daylight. With that, she led her grandkids back into her house for an evening of reading and sharing with each other until it was time to go to sleep. However, Sarah was feeling restless. The idea of being able to actually travel to the fairy world kept filling her head, and she was too excited to sleep. She climbed out of bed and quickly snuck to her bag to unpack her swimsuit and moved to the bathroom to change quickly. Then it was a matter of trying to get out of the house without anyone noticing. As she was heading downstairs, her cousin June was coming up. Sarah, why are you awake? She asked. Sarah quickly put a finger to her mouth. Shh! I want to see if it's true, Sarah replied. And Grandma will never let me try. You want to jump into the pot? June asked. You'll get in so much trouble. Not if you come with me, Sarah said. It's only dangerous if I'm by myself, but if you're with me, you can run for help. It's okay, I already know how to swim. I don't know about this, June started. Please, just one swim. If it doesn't work, I won't try again. But I have to know, Sarah pleaded. Okay, but Grandma's still up. I went for a drink of water, and I was supposed to be back in bed, and so are you. We can't get out yet. Let's fix her. She needs to sleep first. The girls returned to their bedroom for another hour and snuck out again, walking down the stairs and saw the living room empty and dark. I think it's safe. Let's go. Sarah waved to June, and together they walked out of the house towards the pond. I hope the moon is still out and shining on the pond, Sarah said. What if it's not? We go back inside and try another night, Sarah replied. As they left the safety of their grandmother's house, the light of the moon guided the girls to their goal. The reflection of the moon upon the pond made it and the surrounding area bright enough for the girls to see. We're here, and the moon is still shining, Sarah grinned. Over the past few hours, as the moon transited across the sky, its reflection moved over the surface of the pond, and now is close to the side where the tire swing hung. Look, Sarah said, this will make it easy. She headed to the tire swing and got on it. Push me. I changed my mind, June called out to her cousin. This is a bad idea. Please come down and come back to the house. You're starting to sound like Mark, Sarah retorted, trying to ruin everyone's fun. June started to tear up at being compared to her rigid brother. Am not, she shouted, and shoved with all her tiny might. Sarah jumped off as soon as the swing reached its highest point, plunging into the water right where the moon's reflection shone. Opening her eyes, Sarah saw a light and swam towards it, though it felt at first as if she was going deeper underwater. Then suddenly, as her little lungs started to beg for air and she was feeling disoriented, it felt as if she was swimming upwards instead of downwards, and she broke through the surface. Gasping for air and coughing a little, she heard the laughter of many children. Looking around, she saw she definitely wasn't in her grandmother's home anymore. Sarah saw that the laughter came from what looked like a playground near the edge of the pond, though it wasn't like any playground she ever saw. Firstly, there was a soft blue glow all around the area. Then she noticed she was surrounded by large trees. Vines hanging from them were being used as swings. A hollowed-out, curved tree trunk was being slid down by one child after another, though the tree itself seemed like it was still alive. Branches above her head linked together and formed monkey bars, and the children playing looked like no one Sarah had ever met. Counting them, Sarah noticed 7 of them. They wore clothes that seemed to be made of stitched-together leaves, and all had unkempt hair, each one representing a different color of the rainbow. It was also difficult for her to tell who were boys and who were girls. Suddenly, the one with the blue hair noticed the newcomer and smiled at her. Come play with us, they said. Where am I? Sarah asked as she swam towards the shore. The playground, of course, the other child replied, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. They approached the edge of the water and held up their hand. What's your name? Sarah inquired as she got out of the water. Oh, you shouldn't ask a fairy that, they replied. Names are very special to us. We only tell someone if we really trust them. I'm sorry, I didn't know. You're very pretty either way, she commented. Thanks, the fairy clapped. What's your favorite game? Want to swing? Slide? Climb? Tag? Do you know hide and seek? Sarah asked after a moment of thought. Ooh, that's a fun one, the fairy grinned. Everyone come here, they called out to their playmates. Time for hide and seek. Suddenly, the other fairies approached and greeted Sarah happily. It's very nice to meet you all, Sarah smiled. I've always wanted to meet and play with fairies. She's a human, isn't she? The orange-haired one asked. Is that a problem? Sarah asked with concern. Not at all, the red-haired one laughed. We just have different rules for playing with humans. I mean, you can't fly or turn invisible, so we have to make it fair for you. Wow, you can do that? Sarah was awestruck. Yep, the green one just jumped off the ground and hung in midair. See? Nope, she doesn't see. Suddenly, the violet one vanished before Sarah's eyes. Hey now, no cheating, the indigo one called after the others. They were just showing off. Don't be stick in the mud, the yellow one replied, to which the indigo one stuck out their tongue. Sarah giggled. The way you argue is just like people. Fairies are people too, the blue one said. We laugh and cry and love and get angry just like you do. But for now, let's play, he crowed. The violet one reappeared and the green one landed on the ground before joining their fellows and rushing off to hide from their fun visitor. Sarah counted to 20 before announcing she was ready to seek them out. The first place she tried was at the top of the slide, and peering down the hollowed log, she found the red-haired one sitting in the middle of it. Giggling, Sarah slid down the slide until she caught them in her lap, and together they slid the rest of the way down. Found you! She squealed in delight. Now go find the others, they encouraged. Sarah saw that the side of one of the trees had a thick mushroom growing out of it, making it easy to climb and reach where the branches linked in a monkey bar fashion. Swinging her arms to go across, she found the orange-haired one also on the monkey bars, but doing a handstand above her. Are you flying right now? Sarah asked. Nope, I'm just good at balance. It's not cheating, they replied. You have to touch my hand to catch me. They started moving away from Sarah, prompting her to hurry up and reach out. She almost lost her own balance and fell to the water below before the fairy grabbed her hand with her own. You can't fly, remember? They said with concern. Oh no, I made you lose, Sarah pouted. Maybe I wanted you to win. They winked back as they helped Sarah get her grip back. 2 down. Sarah was able to swing to the other side of the monkey bars after that and saw one of the other fairies, the one with the yellow hair, swinging from one vine to another. Seeing a loose vine in front of her, Sarah grabbed it and swung her way towards the next one. She missed it and swung back to where she started, but tried again and this time grabbed it and moved on. Now that she was getting the hang of it, the young girl was able to get from vine to vine to catch up with her new playmate. Wow, you're a fast learner, they said as Sarah approached. Now you have to tag me. With a grin, they swung towards Sarah, passing by her surprised face as they reached the safety of a thick branch. Try again, the fairy encouraged, and Sarah swung back out towards them as they swung back towards her. And this time, Sarah bravely reached her hand out and touched the yellow-haired fairy on the shoulder. Hooray, you did it! They grinned at her as she returned to the branch on the return swing. Where can I look next? Sarah wondered as she gazed about the fairies' playground. She gasped in surprise as she saw the pond from above for the first time, and 2 things stood out to her. One was a few exceptionally large lily pads. The other was the reflection on the water that gave the area the soft blue glow. She saw the earth itself, and looking above for the first time, she saw it hanging in the sky, bright, beautiful, and large. The little girl suddenly felt a wave of homesickness for the first time since arriving. The yellow-haired fairy put her hand on her shoulder. Your home is beautiful too. I can tell you miss it, they said. But can you please finish our game? We don't get nice visitors like you that often. Yes, I want to keep playing. It won't be fair to the others if I don't find them, will it? Sarah responded. She was thinking of what else could be used for play, and she took another look at the giant lily pads and swore she saw one of them spinning slowly. Finding some more large mushrooms from the side of the tree she was on, Sarah climbed down easily and headed back towards the water. She jumped in and swam towards the lily pad, reaching the edge of it and pulling her small body up and on top of it. Huddled on the other side of it was the green-haired fairy. Oh, I thought my hair would help me blend in, they pouted. It did. It's just your pad was the only one spinning, so I thought someone was here, Sarah explained as she crawled towards the green-haired fairy. Tag! She giggled. Spinning? I guess it's spinning a little. It shouldn't, though. Why is that? Oh, it must be that cheeky. They stopped themselves, worried they were about to give away the name of one of the others. Ooh, thanks for the hint. Sarah winked to the fairy as she jumped back into the water, and this time she took a deep breath before going down. Looking under the lily pad, she saw the blue-haired fairy swimming underneath and playfully spinning it slowly. Then they noticed Sarah and quickly swam away and back to the surface. Sarah swam up as well, and when she reached the surface, was listening for the sounds of splashing from the other side of the lily pad. The little girl swam around in a circle, trying to catch up with the blue-haired fairy, but it sounded like they were swimming at the same pace. You 2 are going to make me dizzy, the green-haired one chimed in from the center of the lily pad, trying to follow their playmates. Sarah took that moment to turn around and swim in the opposite direction, hoping the fairy didn't do the same. She was right, and when she caught up, they had quite the surprised look on their face. Holding my breath underwater for a long time wasn't against the rules. That would help me win, they explained. You almost did, Sarah smiled, but now I'm going to tag you. She giggled as she reached towards them. The blue-haired fairy tried to swim away, but she managed to touch their feet. Gotcha! Tickle, tickle! The blue-haired fairy started to laugh uncontrollably. Okay, you got me, they squealed happily. Where's the next one? Sarah asked. I need my hint. Think about what else the playground has. We have them too. They just look different. Okay, we had a slide, monkey bar, swings, something like a merry-go-round. Sarah thought out loud as she looked around the area again. This time something new stood out. Between two short trees that curved towards each other was a spider web. For it to be noticeable from this far away, though, the strands had to be extra thick. Swimming back to shore, Sarah got out of the water and ran towards the giant web. I hope whatever spider made this isn't here anymore, she said with a shudder. A spider didn't make this, I did. Sarah turned and looked, and climbing around the web, she saw the indigo-haired fairy. Oops! They gasped as they realized they were found. Hi, I'm gonna get you, Sarah called up to them. She jumped on the web and was surprised it wasn't sticky.
Okay, I won't do it.
Huh? Okay, I guess that's what makes this a fairy web, she concluded. Looking up at her playmate, she smiled and started to climb. You're good at this game, the indigo-haired fairy said as they also climbed up. Can you reach the top? I'm gonna try. Sarah started her own ascent, and when she was almost at the top, the indigo-haired fairy suddenly squeezed between some strands and was climbing down facing the other way. Can't catch me, they called after Sarah. Hey, come back! Sarah reached between the strands, hoping to catch them as they passed her, but she suddenly saw how high up she was and got dizzy. Instinctively, she grabbed the strands she was on tighter so as not to fall. Help! She called out. I'm coming, the fairy replied, forgetting the game for a moment and climbing back up towards her visitor. You'll be fine, just don't look down. Look up as you climb down, they advised. Oh, okay. Sarah took a few breaths before trying what her new friend suggested, the fairy following close by. Before long, they were both safely back on the ground. Oh no, did I ruin the game? She asked. It's fine, it's just a game. We don't want you to get hurt, they replied. I forfeit, they called out. What about the last one? Sarah asked. I'm up here. Looking up, Sarah saw the violet hair fairy balancing on a long branch that stretched over the entire pond. Do I still have to catch you? If you want to go home, you'll have to jump from up here anyway, so might as well, they called back. But I'm scared, Sarah said. Wasn't it scary just finding your way here? The indigo hair fairy replied. Only the brave are able to find this place, even with the right method, and only the brave can return. Unless you really do want to stay. I just wanted to know that this place was real. I wanted to make fairy friends, and I did. But my mom and dad and grandma and cousins will all worry about me. I better go back. Then go on up there. I promise you we won't let you get hurt, but you have to be brave enough to make it. Okay then. Sarah put a hand over her heart before finding the correct tree to climb. Once at the bough, she saw the long branch was also thick enough to act as a balance beam. In the middle stood the violet-haired fairy. Come on, you can do it, they encouraged. Sarah gulped and spread her arms out as far as she could before slowly walking along the branch. The other fairies all floated in the air nearby, just in case she were to fall. They clapped slowly in time to each step Sarah took to cheer her on. Do it! Do it! Do it! They chanted. Sarah didn't know if it was fairy magic or just the feeling of being cheered on by friends, but she finally arrived at the center of the bow. I did it! Sarah cheered. Careful! The violet-haired fairy said with a small laugh. Now what? Do I jump from way up here? Sarah looked down and it was the highest point in this fairy playground. But directly beneath her, she could see the reflection of the earth shining on the surface of the pond. It's so high! You can do it. We believe in you, the violet-haired fairy smiled at her. Thank you for playing with me, Sarah said, a few tears starting to well up. I'll miss you. And I wish my cousins could have seen this. Especially Mark. They'll never believe this. Then have a souvenir, the red-haired one called out, floating towards Sarah. They reached into their messy hair and pulled something out tangled into it. It was a small feather, but it was glowing, and it changed colors every few seconds. They don't have this where you're from, I bet. They approached Sarah and carefully stuck it in her own hair, while making sure she was still able to keep her balance. Thank you. I'll always treasure it. Oh, I'd hug you if I didn't think it'd make me fall. That's okay. The feeling is enough. Now hurry before it's too late. Sarah looked down at the reflection of the shining earth again and held her breath. As she jumped, the last thing she heard was the cheers and applause of her fairy friends before diving into the water. Sarah got deeper this time than when she left her home, and like the last time, she felt very disoriented before seeing a dim light in one direction. Swimming towards it, she reached the surface again, coughing. There she is, Grandma! Sarah heard in the shadow June and looked, and seeing her cousin pointing at her, Mark was also there, and to Sarah's surprise, he was crying. Sarah! Grandmother rushed into the water after her and grabbed her as soon as she was within reach. Sobbing, she picked her up and helped carry her out of the pond. You are in so much trouble, young lady. No more swimming for you or your cousins. Do you have any idea how scared you made us? What were you thinking? I am so sorry, Grandma. I wanted to see the fairy world like you said. I shouldn't have said anything. This is my fault. Your uncle may have been right all along, Grandmother cried. No more fairy tales. No, please, Grandma, not that. Anything but that. I won't do it again. If they encourage you to do something dangerous like this, then they're a bad idea. No, they're wonderful. And I did go to the fairy world. Look at my hair, Sarah said. Your hair? What do you mean? Grandmother looked puzzled through her tear-stained eyes. I see it, Mark pointed. Something's glowing. A feather? June asked. Where did it come from? It came from my story, Sarah said as Grandmother gasped, seeing the proof for herself. The end.
Was awesome.
Something a little more lighthearted for the anthology I thought everyone would like.
Oh yeah.
You said you had something else to say about where it came from after the story?
Oh yes. Basically, I based the know-it-all character of Mark of myself when I was that age. I was the nerdy know-it-all, really into science, thought fantasy was baby stuff, didn't care for it back then. Like, I guess I could have been a real brat at that age, didn't have very many friends, so, like, was real engrossed in stuff. And his father was kind of based on my father at that time. He was, like, all about doing good in school, doing good in school. You don't need any of this baby kid stuff anymore. And as for to where the idea of this came from, kind of another old childhood fantasy. You know, in the summertime, if you have the kind of sprinklers that shoot water straight up and go back and forth like this in a fan formation, when I was a little kid, I used to imagine that running through the sprinkler jets was like traveling through a portal to another dimension, and back and forth I would go. So I expanded it for this story. That's
so
where the
cool.
idea came from. And I based Grandmother's House on a loose description from what Mary told me her great aunt's house was kind of like, that she absolutely adored.
I love that. Who wanted to go next?
I can go next.
We can go next. Okay.
I shall. All right, my story is called The Fairy Trap. And as I stated earlier, this is actually inspired by a true event that I witnessed. So I'm going to give them some setup for it. Now, the story itself is all a concoction of my imagination, but the event, before I moved here to Ohio, I was a member of the Society for Creative Anachronisms, the SEA, a nonprofit educational organization that's dedicated to the recreation of pre-17th century history. One of the largest events that the SEA holds every year is called PINZIC, which is held in Pennsylvania. I went to PINZIC back in 2011, and this is where that event took place that inspired the story. I'm on Merchants Row. I'm outside one of the shops talking to the proprietor of that particular booth, and he had a fountain sitting in front of his shop with flowers and little shiny baubles and all this stuff surrounding it. And I asked him, I said, "What's with the fountain?" And he looked straight at me, no irony in his voice, no emotion whatsoever. He said, "It's a fairy trap." Not even 3 seconds later, this little girl walks by with what I assume was her parents, and she sees this fountain and immediately stops and bends down to inspect it and goes, "Ooh." And I looked at him and he looked at me, and we both just burst out laughing. How do you catch a fairy? With a fairy trap. So I'm laying in bed trying to think about what I can write for this particular anthology, and my mind comes back to that particular event, and which is what made me go, huh. Now, how can I write that into a story? And I came up with the story that's now in the anthology, The Fairy Trap. Rafe and Arlo Arrington crouched in the hunting blind, hidden deep in the woods that sprawled out on their family's sizable estate. "Remind me again what we're doing here," said Arlo as he fidgeted, trying to get comfortable. "We're going to catch ourselves a fairy," his brother responded. "Fairies don't exist," said Arlo, finally sitting down with his hunting rifle by his side. "I thought you said we were out here to hunt deer." "Well, if we see one, we'll bag that too," said Rafe, "but that's not my main concern." "What makes you think fairies are real anyway? Like, what, Tinkerbell and shit?" Rafe elbowed his brother. "You remember all those stories we heard growing up, how the woods were haunted, don't go into the woods after dark and all that mess?" "Yeah, so?" "It got me to thinking, what if there's something to it? Spirits living in the woods, but ain't nobody ever died here, not that I'm aware of, so can't be ghosts. Must be something else, right?" "Yeah, okay. So fairies, right? It's got to be fairies." Arlo looked at his brother with some concern. "You're an idiot." Rafe elbowed him again. "You dragged me out here in the middle of the night on some goose chase for your childhood fantasies?" Rafe wasn't swayed. "Just watch," he said. "And how do you catch a fairy anyway?" Arlo asked. "With a trap," Rafe indicated the clearing below. In the distance, Arlo could see what looked like a shrine. It was a circular bed of flowers of all different colors scattered around a tree trunk. The tree trunk was adorned with some shimmering gauze fabric, and laid out on top of it were sparkling jewels of all shapes and sizes. "Is that Mom's jewelry?" Arlo asked. "She's going to kill you if anything happens to it." "I needed bait. Just relax. Just shut up and watch." Arlo did as he was told. He harumphed to himself, but in the back of his mind, he was deeply curious at his brother's intent. He felt a little bit like Linus waiting for the great pumpkin, but he said nothing. Time passed, but nothing happened. Arlo was bored, on the verge of falling asleep. He looked at his watch. It was nearing 1 a.m. They'd been out there for 2 hours, lying down in the blind. His body was stiff, and he desperately needed to relieve himself. "Rafe, we've been out here for hours, and nothing's happened. Let's go home, man." "Wait," said Rafe, "just a little longer. This is about the time they're supposed to come out, right? The witching hour or some shit." "I can't believe I'm humoring you on this." Stupid. A noise came from further in the woods, the sounds of twigs cracking. Both brothers' ears perked up as they craned their necks, alert for any movement. Slowly, the visage of a young girl entered their field of view. She was about 3.5 feet tall, with long blonde hair pulled back into a French braid ponytail. She had very blue eyes and very pale skin. She was dressed in a white gown that seemed entirely too clean for a young girl that would be prancing around the woods in the dark. Something about it did not sit right with Rafe. "Ooh!" the young girl exclaimed as she saw the jewelry spread out on the trunk. She kneeled to inspect. "Now!" whispered Rafe. Arlo did as he was told and released a rope that had been tied off near him. Immediately, a netting dropped and encased the girl. She whirled around as Rafe and Arlo leapt up from their blind and ran toward her. As they approached, the young girl shrank back in fear. "What the hell, Rafe? It's just some kid." Rafe ignored him. "What's your name?" "Sophie." the little girl answered. She seemed on the verge of tears. No, said Rafe, your real name. That is my real name, said the girl. Are you going to hurt me? Will you let me go, please? I'm sorry. I wasn't going to take anything. Good try, said Rafe. Not buying it. You're a fairy. Tell me your real name. Arlo rolled his eyes, but Rafe was determined. I don't know what you're talking about, sobbed the young girl. Rafe, come on, man. She's scared. This is weird, even for you. Rafe wasn't swayed. He slipped a backpack off his back and unzipped it. He reached inside and pulled out a metal rod about an arm's length. Is that a branding iron? Arlo asked. He could see it had the scripted A the family used for livestock. Emphasis on the iron, answered Rafe. He held it in front of the little girl's face. He cupped his hand over the scripted A to show it was cold, not heated like it would normally be used for branding. Now, if you're not a fairy, he said to the girl, then this will have no effect on you. He waved it at her. But if you are, if this touches you, we will know the truth now, won't we? Rafe paused. The girl shrank back further under the netting. I ask you again, what is your name? Timidly, the little girl responded, Sophie. There were tears in her eyes now. Very well, then, said Rafe. Without any fanfare, he drove the branding iron toward the girl's upper arm. It found its contact, and the girl yelped out in pain as the flesh began to sizzle and smoke around it. Rafe withdrew the iron. In its wake was a very clear, still red, scripted A, marking the girl's pale flesh. At that moment, the young girl seemed to shimmer before them as her body began changing. She was increasing in size at a rapid rate. The netting fell away, and as it did so, two enormous, colorful, and transparent wings unfolded from her back. Before them stood the same girl, now much older looking and standing at an adult height, slightly taller than Rafe. Her frame was lean with long limbs and no visible muscles. She appeared frail, but her demeanor and the look on her face was icy and determined. She glimmered slightly, giving off a luminescence underneath the moonlight. However, the scripted A was still visible on her arm. Holy shit! Exclaimed Arlo. I knew it, said Rafe. I'm not giving you my name, said the fairy, but you may call me Glisten. All right, Glisten, began Rafe. I'm told that if you catch a fairy, you can ask it for one wish, and it must grant it. Is that true? Yes, said Glisten with no preamble or pretense. Arlo was finally catching up. Wait, so we caught you, so now you have to grant us a wish? Rafe elbowed him again. Arlo retreated. I don't have to do anything, but I'm bound by fairy law and custom. You caught me fair and square, so yes, as much as I might hate the idea, I must grant you a wish. It's a stupid law. Listen, fairy, started Rafe. We never intended to hurt you, and if you help us out, we'll let you go. As simple as that. Deal? You should know about making deals with fairies, warned Glisten. I'm aware, but if it weren't important, we wouldn't be here now. I'm listening, said Glisten. Rafe cleared his throat. I want you to help us save the estate. That's all. This time Arlo spoke up. Rafe, what are you doing? He grabbed his brother by the shoulder, but Rafe shook him off. Listen, Arlo, this place is mortgaged to the hilt. We've sold off what we can. If we don't do something, the estate's going to be sold off at auction. You know this. This is our last resort, brother. If the fairy can help us, we at least got to try. Arlo held his hands in the air, conceding. Rafe turned back to Glisten. So can you help us? Glisten appeared to think it over. She then closed her eyes and her wings fluttered. Around them, the entire world seemed to ripple, like a pebble had just been thrown into a pond. Whatever magic the fairy held wasn't seen, but the small hairs on the brothers' arms stood up. They could feel something had changed. Very well, said Glisten. It's done. Expect some good news later today. Rafe looked around. That's it? That's all there is to it? What were you expecting? Asked Glisten. You asked for something intangible that largely deals with possibilities. We're magic, not miracle workers. Even magic has its limitations. All I did was put the magic out there to sway the possibility in your favor. That's the best I can do. I've heard you fairies are tricksters, said Rafe. You better not be messing with us. Look, we had a deal. I save your estate, you let me go free. Whether you choose to believe it or not, I held up my end of the deal. Unless you want me to start using my magic on you, I suggest you hold up yours. Rafe looked uncomfortable with the threat. He considered Glisten's words. Okay then, but if I find out you pulled one over on us, I'm going to come back and find you, and I won't be as nice the next time. Glisten shrugged. Fair enough, but don't expect to catch me twice. Before Rafe could respond, Glisten transformed into a ball of bright light and was gone. Arlo, grab the jewelry. Let's get out of here. In a clearing hidden to the world that had never been discovered by human eyes, Glisten relayed the account to her king. She showed the brand that was still stinging on her arm. The king looked concerned and a little dismayed. The king was quite the exact opposite to Glisten. He stood much taller than her, with long, curly black hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He was adorned with silk and jewels that were testimony to his magnificence. But not a king, just an image. He was a king that had earned it. He was a true warrior of the Fae folk, and had earned his right to the crown on the battlefield as a leader. When he spoke with conviction, and his subjects listened, not out of fear, but respect, as Glisten listened now. Really, Glisten, I'm surprised that you were so easily fooled by the humans. That's not like you. I'm sorry, my lord, but then unable to think of any better excuse. They had baubles. The king sighed and rubbed his forehead. You were careless, he said. None of our kind have been discovered in well over 100 years, and you were taken in by shinies? Glisten shrugged, not knowing what to say. Still, you're branded, the king continued, made by iron. That's a mark you're going to have to bear from here forward. You can see the healer about easing the pain, but I fear the worst is yet to come for you. You'll be laughed at by the other Fae, forever known as the girl who was caught by a human. Glisten had not considered this aspect until now. The thought brought tears to her eyes. She knew the king was right. To be outsmarted by a human was a disgrace to the Fae folk. There's nothing you can do? She asked, indicating the red mark on her arm. It was made by iron, Glisten. Furthermore, it's a brand, and you know what that implies. You're bound by it. I can do nothing about that. You might be able to cover it up or mask it with some salve or cream, but it's not going away. That's on you. As a reminder of your foolishness, I feel for you. I truly do. But that was your mistake, yours alone. As king, I must uphold our laws. You can try to make the situation right, and if you do, the ridicule you may face may be less, but you're stuck with the mark. None of our kind have ever been branded before. The best you can do is to make it count for something. Glisten listened to his words. Making a snap decision, she brought herself up to her full height, squared her shoulders. Then I will do what I can do to make it right, she said. The next day, Rafe and Arlo were busying themselves about the estate. Both sat in the great room. Arlo sat by the massive fireplace, cleaning the hunting rifle he had used the night previous. Rafe sat at a small, ornate desk, busying himself with some financial documents for the estate's lawyer. The two worked on their respective tasks in silence. That silence was broken by a knocking coming from the front entry hallway. Someone was at the door. Arlo looked at Rafe. Are you expecting anybody? Could be the good news the fairy talked about. The knocking came again. Slowly, the two men rose. Rafe took the lead as they made their way into the front hall, where they peered at the large decorative door, which was lined on both sides by opaque glass. Rafe and Arlo could see a shadowy figure on the opposite side, obscured by the glass. Rafe approached the door as the knocking continued. Cautiously, he turned the knob, pulled the door inward. Standing just outside was a short man with thinning black hair, greased back on his head. He wore very thin wire-frame glasses and a neatly pressed black pinstripe suit with a dark blue shirt and burgundy tie. He clutched a black leather briefcase with both hands. Can I help you? Asked Rafe. Mr. Arrington? The man's voice was as thin as his hair, with a tinny resonance. Depends on who's asking, Rafe responded. He offered nothing. My name is Montgomery Grimm. I'm an independent auditor hired by your state law firm to go over the financial records you've submitted. And I believe I've found a discrepancy, a rather large one, in your favor. Can we talk? A smile spread across Rafe's face. Absolutely, he said. Come on in. He led the diminutive man into the great room to the desk where he had been working. The auditor took one of the oversized chairs near the desk and sat down. He placed his briefcase on top of a stack of papers Rafe had been working on and opened it. From inside, he pulled out a manila folder and retrieved a document and handed it to Rafe. The document was a ledger. Rafe looked it over, but it made no sense to him. What is this? He asked. What's this mean? These ledger entries were compiled by your family's various business enterprises. Now, if you take them individually, the errors are small, insignificant. No one will notice them. But when you compile them together, you start to see some consistencies. Not necessarily a mishandling of funds per se, but amounts entered and correctly transposed across lines, not paying attention to detail, and things like that. Just shoddy bookkeeping. The results being cumulatively compiled over the last decade, the business earnings are reported considerably more than what they should be. And you've been paying taxes on higher amounts all these years. So with everything adjusted to what it should be, it means you should be owed a refund. Yeah? Asked Rafe. How much? Enough to bring the estate out of debt and provide some operating expenses to get back on track, ended Montgomery. We will take care of the paperwork, but we will need you to sign some documents. Rafe smiled again. He picked up a pen. Just show me where to sign. And one more thing, Montgomery interjected. I was told to tell you Glisten sends her regards. Rafe froze in his seat. I'm sorry, what? You see, Mr. Arrington, there are many different types of Fae, and you branded the wrong one. With that, the man named Montgomery Grin began to transform. From his forehead protruded a set of horns, glossy and black, which extended out and curled over the top of his head. His face was contorting, cheeks sunken, bearing a set of vicious fangs and obsidian black eyes. When he stood up from the chair, he had grown nearly 2 feet, now standing several heads taller than Rafe. The smart business suit he had been wearing had disappeared. He was now bare-chested with massive muscles, rippling and scarred. His legs were now adorned with a fine black silken fur, and his feet were hooved. You can come in now, cousin, called the horned creature. From the hallway entered Sophie, but the little girl looks in the fairy wings had been replaced by a young blonde woman who looked to be in her early 30s, wearing a dark blue suit jacket over a light blue blouse and a knee-length dark blue skirt. Her hair was pulled tightly back on her head and wrapped in a bun. She wore dark-framed glasses to complete the illusion. She casually strode toward the desk where Rafe sat stunned, his eyes darting between this goat-like creature before him to the very human-looking fairy that approached him. Arlo had risen from his seat, his hand reaching for his gun, but Sophie Glisten waved him down. Mr. Arrington, meet my cousin Grim, or Monty to the outside world, if you wish. He agreed to help me settle the score. You see, we Fae are a very tight-knit lot. You mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. You just happen to threaten the wrong fairy. I'm not the helpless little girl you saw. No, we walk among you. We conduct business with you. We live in your houses. We even serve you coffee at your favorite Starbucks. We have existed alongside you for millennia. And the only way that happens is if we do something to protect our anonymity, our true nature. You branded me, Mr. Arrington. I take responsibility for that, for being careless, but like cattle, branding shows a sign of ownership. And I will not be owned by any man, Mr. Arrington. By our laws, that means we need to make a new deal, one which releases me from your ownership. Really? Asked Rafe. So if I own you, that means you have to do whatever I say? Sophie Glisten looked uncomfortable, but answered honestly, Yes, Mr. Arrington, that is correct. Thought Rafe. I think I like the sound of this. This has possibilities. I was hoping we could come to a more suitable arrangement, said Sophie Glisten. Grim here, as an auditor, could act as a witness to make sure it's all legal. Well, if Grim, as you call him, truly is an auditor in the employ of my estate's law firm, that means he already works for me, doesn't it? He's already bound by duty to do what I ask anyway. Grim looked at Sophie, who was attempting to show no sign of discomfort. I was hoping for a peaceful resolution, Mr. Arrington, but playing this out, I can see you believe you have the upper hand, and you are not going to be reasonable. Therefore, I can only bring this negotiation to its one logical conclusion. What's that? Asked Rafe. Grim. Sophie looked up at the massive creature, who stepped forward. Then Grim's jaw extended farther than was humanly possible as he leaned down and clamped down on Rafe's head. With one quick jerking motion, the head released from Rafe's body as blood spray erupted from the neck cavity. Rafe's body stood frozen, then dropped to the floor with a dull thud. Arlo jumped up from his seat and grabbed a shotgun. "What the fuck?" he exclaimed. Sophie Glisson turned toward Arlo. "No, Mr. Arlo. You know that will do nothing to us. Be smart, and this ends here. With your brother's death, I am released from my ownership, and you get to keep the estate, the sole owner. That huge refund will be all yours. That sounds like a fair trade, doesn't it?" Arlo thought this over. The gun shook in his hands. "But you killed my brother," he responded. "And I regret that. I truly do. But your brother would not have been reasonable and signed the documents to release me. He would have used me for his own gains, and I can't have that. Surely you can understand." Arlo was on the verge of tears. He looked at the corpse of his brother lying on the ground next to the desk. Next to it was a 7-foot-tall demon goat just waiting for Arlo to make a false move. He knew if he did not concede, he would end up like his brother, or worse. "Shoot me if it'll make you feel any better. It won't hurt me, but if it brings an end to this situation..." Arlo didn't hesitate. He pulled the trigger. And Sophie Glisson was right. The lead buckshot peppered the room, but Sophie Glisson and Grin were unfazed. "Feel better now?" asked Sophie. Arlo sank back into his chair. The gun dropped to the floor. He sunk his head into his hands and began bawling. "Let's go, Grimsy. We're done here." With that, the two disappeared in a ball of light. Arlo was left alone in the room with the headless corpse of his brother, unsure of what to do next. "Glisson, report!" The king sat on his throne, looking every bit as bored as he felt from the day's proceedings. But this was the last order of business, and he was curious to hear the Fae's report. He sat up to give his full attention. "Yes, my lord," began Glisson. She was back in her natural form, wearing her best court garb and a lavender gown adorned with rubies and pearls. Her colorful, translucent wings were pulled back tightly behind her. "I regret the outcome, but thinking the scenario through, I did not see that the one called Rafe Arrington would have been amenable to the new deal. I believe he would have tried to use me for his own gains, and as such would have risked exposure of our kind in the long run. This presented a threat to the Fae. As you know, by our laws, the ownership could only end if he signed the document willingly releasing me, or by his death, which would have terminated ownership naturally. I chose the latter as the only option." "I understand," responded the king. "But what about the brother, the one called Arlo? He is still aware of our kind, is he not?" "Yes, unfortunately. However, after what transpired, Arlo was arrested for the murder of his brother and is currently being held while the investigation continues. Though Arlo was not directly responsible, he did fire the gun, which is the only evidence the police have now. Grim does, however, know people who can work on Arlo's defense to get him released to make his brother's death appear a suicide. Then we have our own people in place who can wipe Arlo's memory. He will have no recollection of us, only that his brother, who was so distraught at the thought of losing his estate, turned the gun on himself. Arlo will still receive the refund and the estate, and its assets will become rightfully his, thus keeping to my end of the original deal." "Very well," answered the king. "Yes, the death is regrettable, but it does ensure the protection of our people, and you did ultimately abide by Fae law where negotiations are concerned. I suspect in due time, this will all blow over for the humans, but hopefully it has taught you a valuable lesson, and to be more careful in the future where shiny baubles are involved." "Absolutely, my lord, and there is one more thing." "What's that?" asked the king, curious. Glisson rolled up the sleeve of her gown to reveal pristine skin where the brand once was. "Huh," said the king. "That is indeed interesting. It would seem that once the ownership was lifted, the brand was no longer valid, and it disappeared." "Congratulations," said the king. "That's a first, even for our kind. I'm sure our historians would like to be made aware of this development. Good work, Glisson." The Fae beamed proudly. She had turned a potentially dreadful situation into an entry for the history books, and that was quite an accomplishment. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That was amazing, man. I really love that
I
one.
love that one.
Hello. I can't hear anybody. I think I'm going to have to go off because I can't hear anybody.
Sorry, it is being aggravating today.
Mm-hmm. So I
Yeah,
wrote
it
that
kept
one
kicking her out.
specifically for Fae Propaganda.
I did mine too. but I'd already read mine beforehand, before the show, because I couldn't find anything else on Owlite Society one day, and I'm like, I'll read this.
Yeah.
Oops.
Weird observation. Like, this is a Saturday night. I remember, like, years ago, like, I would have had to gone out to a club, like, decades ago, like, or, like, I wasn't, like, enjoying my Saturday, but, like, I don't know if it's just that I'm older or just that I've come to love writing so much, but, like, sitting here and just reading stories to each other, like, probably means more to me right now than, like, probably anything I normally did growing up on the weekends. I don't know why. It's more fulfilling for some
I
reason.
appreciate you guys. I
Well,
agree.
I'm just glad I got invited out to this one, and glad everybody liked my story.
Oh, yeah, man.
That was good.
And it's
If you haven't
Saturday
figured
night
out, I
is for
love
hanging
your
out with
writing.
friends.
Yeah, exactly, man. It's an awesome fucking night with friends, sharing stories with each other, hopefully sharing stories with other people at home. Like, it's just, I don't know. It's my favorite thing to do, man.
Are you back, Patty?
I am.
Is your head
Although,
Oh,
in order to be heard, I have to have it go through my speakers, so there may end up being a minor feedback. I apologize.
it's all right. We'll work with it.
So, Patty, what did you think of the story since you were resetting?
I will tell you what I thought of it originally.
Mhm.
I loved it. The dudes got what they deserved. Rafe and Arlo got what they deserved, and I really was happy to see them get it.
Plus,
I
all the
was,
legalese stuff. That was kind of funny.
yeah. You had just enough of the legal side of it to make it interesting, and I liked the twist at the end. I loved how she figured out how to make things work without it coming back to bite her. And she got out of being branded. I love that. I thought that was such a nice twist. And
In
I
my
did
mind,
enjoy it.
Rafe was never really a bad guy, and he never actually did mean Glisten any harm. But I wanted a slight element of horror in there, so I had to think about how I wanted to do that, and I realized that if Rafe's greed kind of overtook his rational logic of the situation, that would sort of steer it in a different direction. And I had to logically think this through myself on, like, what would happen if we played this out? What would be the ultimate climax? And I came to the conclusion that it would probably end with one of their deaths. So I just bypassed all of that and went ahead and went that route.
Well, it's funny. You can ask any of the players that have ever played under me as a DM, because I run D&D. I have run D&D for damn near 30 years now. And any of the players that have ever played in any of my games will tell you, I will not reward greed. I will punish greed, because greed annoys the hell out of me. My games have treasure flowing freely. And I actually do have a story where we had the ritual burning of a character sheet because the guy got too greedy.
Wow.
So it's one of those that when somebody shows greed being punished, it just warms my heart. It's probably a flaw of mine, but I really do enjoy things like that.
Yeah, unfortunately, Arlo was just collateral damage for his brother's greed because he didn't really have anything to do with it. But that's why he got to live.
Which worked.
Yes, I really like this story.
I did too.
Also like the fact that Grin kind of looked like a demon, or was he more based off of a Billy Goat Gruff? I'm trying to figure that one out.
He was based off the original version of Pan.
Oh, okay.
I just made him a little taller and a little darker.
Okay.
So, Patty, you said you wanted to go next.
Yes.
Please tell us about your inspiration.
Mine was me trying to take the Mask of the Red Death and modernize it, but I didn't want it to be a horror story. I wanted it to be a Fae story. That was my thoughts behind it. Becoming. There's a unique beauty in a face hidden, magic in the inviting eyes and full curling lips. A masquerade is often such a pretty thing. I found myself wishing I could have brought a camera. So many of the Fae folk have a taboo against having their picture taken. Still, this was quite breathtaking to behold. As I was standing in the entryway, staring at all the grandeur and trying to decide who to talk to, I was approached by an enchanting Fae in costume. Long feathers poked from long dark hair loosely flowing over golden long-sleeved tunic and pants. The costume was loose about the body, much like a gold cloud. "Come," the tall, lanky Fae dared, intoxicating words at odds with the darkness behind their eyes. Nearly the only part of their face still visible under the elaborate, sparkly mask. "It will only be one dance. Be like us for a song. There is freedom in a dance, just as there is horror in letting go." I worried that letting go was exactly what this mysterious figure wanted from me. I don't think I considered all of the aspects before taking the assignment. Masquerade balls thrown by the Fae courts were a once in a lifetime thing for someone like me. Journalists covering the social beat did not often get invites to such events. The ones that did often either did not return or they changed afterwards. I was determined to make sure that I danced the dance perfectly. That social, polite dance that would allow me to get the article without causing anyone to be angry with me. Angry Fae are a dangerous enemy. I wanted to make no enemies this night. I glided with them, unsure of the steps in this particular dance. I have not danced this one before. I would not want to accidentally step on you, I demurred as I kept time beside the enchanting creature in front of me.
Just typing.
I found myself looking for clues as to gender or even just general race. I figured out I could rule out the dwarves due to the height. Dwarves could also be ruled out due to the lack of beard. Even the female dwarves sported facial hair. They encompassed a good 20 or more separate races. So the Fae masquerade was not a single race under the masks. Even powerful human sorcerers were known to be in attendance. It was held every year, but I was the first journalist in 5 years to be invited. I am not sure what I did to warrant that, but I did not want to give any reason for regret. The creature before me was so light on their feet that I wanted to look for wings. That would have been rude, so I did not. The song ended far too soon, leaving me standing there trying to think of something to extend my time in the presence of this arousal. It occurs that that sounds like a strange word for the situation I was in. Aroused is the exact right word, however. My mind was alert. I was excited by the overwhelming smells and sounds around me. My desire to learn more about them was greater than I could describe. Arousal does not always have to be a sexual thing. They smiled. Please accompany me to the refreshments table. There's only food from the human realm on it. We can gather some refreshments and find a place to talk. I believe you have questions, Madam Journalist? I felt a faint shiver go through me as I agreed. Following them through the bodies of various dancers felt almost surreal, occasionally catching sight of a mask or a body in motion. I wonder if I was intoxicated by the masquerade. There was a heavy feeling in my stomach. I wish I could understand all of the things that I was feeling at that moment. It was overwhelming, that array of sensations flooding me as I tried to keep up. The fairy folk sure understand what hospitality means. The refreshments table was glorious. I saw at least 10 different types of punch, at least a dozen different desserts, and at least 3 savory food options. There were also multiple fruits and nuts in cups for snacking. This was better than any other holiday party I had ever been invited to, even if this was not attached to any traditional human holiday. Humans could not imbibe food from the fairy realm, at least not without consequences. Fairies, the winged ones, they didn't lie. So I was taking on faith that my dance partner had wings. We found a corner nestled under a soft light, and almost tissue-like curtains draped about the room in various places. It felt like we were alone in our own little world under those drapes. Illusion, I think. Is part of what made the Fae so powerful. Human sorcerers who mastered illusion often fit in the best in the Fae realms. My dance partner chose a piece of fruit and popped it into that full, sensual mouth. I took a breath and did the same, mirroring the actions with no heed. Well, Miranda, what do you want to know? Their use of my actual name jolted me. It was the first time all day it was used. The Fae are so very careful about the use of names. I had not given my name to anyone here. I knew better. As a journalist, my name was not a secret, but giving your name to the Fae was asking for trouble. I stopped to consider if I had mentioned who I was at any time since I had entered the masquerade. Shaking my head, for I knew I had not, I answered cautiously, Fair one, you have me at a disadvantage. You have my name. I did not give you my name. and I do not know what to call you. Asking you questions in such a situation would be incredibly rude. Forgive me, but I cannot bear the weight of rudeness in such a place as this. My companion threw back their head and laughed. Fair enough. I am known as Dionysus, a nickname, of course, but it is one that I often use. I am the one who sent you the invite. I read the articles that you have written and find what you write interesting, and I thought you might enjoy the masquerade. I knew that there was more than I was being told, but at least now I had an answer to the question about how I got the invitation. My mind was racing. I still had no idea what race or even gender my companion was, though Dionysus is the name of a Greek god, so I could probably guess that my new friend was male. I had an interview in my head that I was adjusting as I went, but I knew it would have to be delivered carefully. A single misstep could be the end of my life, much less my career. I figured I should probably start with the basic stuff that I would be expected to ask. So, what can you tell me about the Fae entrance to the human realm? All of the records show it as happening around 50 years ago. I tried to sound interested, but not as excited as I was. I didn't want to overwhelm the situation with the first question. Dionysus centrally popped a bit of fruit into his mouth before answering, those dark eyes never leaving my face. We have been in and out of the human realm for quite a while. We merely made our presence known 50 years ago. The myths have always had a touch of truth, Miranda. It was just a matter of who was telling the tale. I followed the fruit with my eyes, almost forgetting what I wanted to say. The interview was more than I was used to. I have been a journalist for over a decade, and I have never been so affected by a subject. If I didn't know it would be considered rude, I would wonder if they'd slipped something into the air to set my senses on fire. Snapping out of the state I was in took effort. Sorry, I seem to be enjoying the ball more than I expected. I figured I had to at least apologize. You said that you were the one to send me an invitation. I want to thank you. This is a wonderful opportunity. May I ask why you invited me? The mysterious smile Dionysus gave caused my stomach to twist. Your writing intrigued me. He did not elaborate. I felt like that was almost a non-answer. He obviously intended to say nothing more, leaving me scrambling for the next question that would not offend, but would still get me an article to turn in. This was going to be more difficult than I realized. Oh, can you tell me what you read that you enjoyed? I rather enjoy knowing that I wrote something that was worth reading, I demurred, hoping to buy time and figure out what else to say. I was having trouble concentrating and my skin was on fire. I did not quite know what was going on, but I knew if I kept him talking, it would buy me time to think. I felt like I was in I felt like I was a bug in a jar. For as much as I was studying him and his response to my questions, he was intently watching me and mine. The way the alcoves were set up, it was made to seem as though we were in a separate room. We could hear the music, and the other senses were inundated with the ball, but sight was just more intimate. It was leading me to feel like I was being seduced by some otherworldly thing, which made no sense to me at all. A slow smile crawled across Dionysus's face. It reminded me of the fairy storytellers of decades past. I decided to go digging into the history of your family. Not invasively, mind. I still followed the rules. He stopped to play with the ribbons on his own mask. Perhaps I should start with a little story. You'll be in the dark until you know. It seems unfair for you to be ignorant. My heart raced as he continued, his voice lowering to a caressing sound that I strained to hear. We Fae are so often longer lived than you humans. It is part of what has caused some confusion between the races. His sigh was louder than the volume of his words. He slowly removed his mask, revealing a fine-boned, masculine face that looked familiar, though I was uncertain as to why. You know who I am? The fairy was directly asking a question. This was not the verbal dance we had been doing all evening. I shook my head. Truth is always the best option for me, and the best policy for dealing with the Fae. You look familiar. I feel like I should know you, but I don't. He laughed, not the magical sound I had been hearing from him all evening, but a harsh and pained sound. The familiar you see will be explained in time. I thought perhaps you were more aware of the hierarchy of the Fae courts. My position has made me something of a celebrity in the human realm. It annoys me. He stopped to consider me, then seeming to be able to find no dishonesty, continued again softly. I'm a fairy prince, for what the title is worth. I am, by the human realm counts, roughly 300 years old. Young for the Fae. He seemed young. Yeah, I was 30, comparing myself to 300. Still, youth has a softness to it. As we age, we gain the sharpness of time. He somehow seemed young and rounded to me. I didn't want to get lost in my musings and miss what he was saying, so I tried to encourage him to continue. Fae have been mingling with the humans for far longer than the humans are aware. I, myself, chose to take human lovers as far back as 200 years ago. Storytellers, mostly. I have a fondness for a good bard. His eyes locked with mine on the last word, leaving me confused. Forgive my question, but what does that have to do with your invitation? I was beginning to hope that this was not some kind of love from afar thing, The humans that the fair folk fell in love with never ended up living happily ever after. Though Fae magic could grant the heart's desire in some cases, it was just as often misused. I wanted anything that dealt with love to actually be my choice and not the results of magic. Dionysus's face could have been made of stone for all the emotion he was letting show. Since you have been here, how have you been feeling? The change of subject seemed to be out of nowhere, so I didn't know how to respond. Like I'm on fire. My skin is too tight. Surprised, my own tongue seemed to be answering without my permission. Nodding, Dionysus smiled. That is because you are feeling the Fae presence for the first time in your life. You're reacting to your heritage, child. My heritage? I'm not sure what you mean, I stuttered, though I was starting to put together pieces of the story. I wanted him to spell it out for me, partially because I was not sure if I believed it, and him speaking it would have to be the truth. Fairies don't lie, at least not the winged ones. With the mask removal, I could see the gossamer wings that he was hiding in the glamour of his costume. The other reason I wanted him to clarify the story is I wanted there to be more mystery to it. I wanted there to be no more mystery to it. Though mystery is a wonderful thing for fiction, this was history. And personal history at that. Mystery is frustrating in the case of trying to figure out where you come from. The Bud was a small, frail human. She did not tell me that she was with child, or I might have stayed with her. He stared off into the distance, seeing something that was not in the room with us. She died giving birth to our daughter. Thankfully, half-Fae children usually do resemble the human parent, so she never developed wings. She was likely considered magical, perhaps even delicate. In the search of your lineage I did, she was a few generations back. The people who raised her probably didn't know who I was. 200 years is a long time in the way that humans see the world. There was almost a melancholy note in his voice as he said that last line. So I am what? Fae descent? Whilst that is fairly cool, I don't understand what it means now. The assignment I was here for had been forgotten. Perhaps this is what happened to all of the other people who were never heard from again. Perhaps they found that the fair folk were just too enticing and they chose not to return to lives full of mostly boredom and work. What it means, Miranda, is that you have options that other humans do not. You now have to make a decision. If you choose to embrace your Fae heritage, you can go with me. I can show you the Fae lands and help you to become. You would have some physical changes. It would probably take a while before you were capable of returning to the human realm. You would be my child as far as my people are concerned. Though I have lived long by human standards, I am still a young man by Fae standards. I have yet to have any other children. The idea seemed outlandish to me. At 30, I was to be child to this fellow who looked half my age. It was enough to stop my mind and let me think. Did I really want to go to the Fae realm? This was all so quick. Panic was suddenly all I could feel. I do not expect you to choose tonight. Tonight was a dance and an offer. You have time, though I will ask you to please not make public the offer made to you tonight. For your own safety, not all are going to be kind. You are a fairy princess, and to some that makes you a target, even if you're not ever going to be in the direct line for the throne. My mom is the cousin of the current ruler of the area that I reside, so I am a prince in the broadest sense of that word. The absurdity of being a fairy princess caused a slight hysterical laugh to bubble up. Yeah, I'm not telling anyone that. I don't think that anyone that I have in my life would actually believe me, which means now I am questioning every single relationship in my life. The laugh ended as something else, closer to a sigh. I was suddenly tired, soul weary, and though I was there for a dance, I just wanted to go home. I realized that was the exact offer I had been given. I came here to become. Now I was being given the opportunity to go home and think about all of what I wanted. Gratitude is not an accurate description for the emotion that flooded me. I knew that my story was not over, that I had decisions that laid ahead of me. Still, in the moment, I was going to be able to go home. I was going to be able to make the decisions in my safe places. Personally, I would have gladly traded the fairy princess thing for that. But I was immediately glad that I was not going to have to. When I have made my mind up, how do I find you? I heard the uncertain warble. Sorry, I hated the uncertain warble I heard in my own voice. I felt like I should be leaving strong. Still, I was leaving, so I didn't think that I could argue with the results. He smiled. I run Fae Corps Publishing. You can ask for me there. Fae Corps was a small press, but a fairly good one. They were known for taking care of the author. Also known for not being too quick to discriminate based on anything other than the quality of the writing the author submitted. I had heard rumors that they were truly fairy run. So, the rumor is true then. Fae run the most unique publishing company in the world. Seems like an unusual place for you to be in business. My inquiry was honest, though anyone else might have seen it as slightly rude. I was probably lucky he did not. Well, I did say I am fond of bards. It was either publishing or something in the music industry. Unfortunately, I think that most of the bards in the music industry have issues with substance abuse, or at least it seemed like that to me, so I decided to go with the storytellers. It made sense to me, he laughed. Nodding, I realized that I understood it. His mindset was becoming clearer to me the more I talked to him. I'm going home now. I will be in touch. Again, I hurried through the mass of people. this time fleeing much like Cinderella from the ball at the stroke of midnight. Though I would have to choose a path, for now my ball was over. It was time to return to the real world, if that was even possible. The end.
I love that story.
Definitely. It was a great
That
one.
explains so much now about how you're able to get so much done and accomplished.
Yeah.
No,
It
that's
all
called not
makes
sleeping.
Faerie don't need to sleep, right? It makes sense now.
And as to your question, Mike, as to whether the protagonist is Ace, yes.
Okay. She is giving me off that vibe. I'm glad I picked up on it.
That was how I intended her, but when I let my daughter read it, who is Ace, she's like, this, yeah, no,
Is it her?
this didn't work, Mom.
Oops.
So apparently the vibe came across even if she didn't get it.
I had previously read mine in the 24-hour special, and I hope everybody enjoyed it there. I wanted to be able to tell Sage's mom's story and how she got started. And that is basically the beginning of her mom's story at the end, where you meet the character's aunt. And I still haven't figured out how to connect everything, but I finally figured out where she came in. Oh yeah, and I still need to run the commercials. So we shall be back from with it.
You actually don't need to run them. You can if you guys want to take a bathroom break, that's fine. But like during the book parties, you don't really need to.
You don't need to? Okay.
Well, no, because then we're celebrating the launch of the book. You know, like if we want to take a break, we can, but you don't actually technically have to.
It might be
Okay,
nice
cool.
to run the Fae Corps one at least.
Well, if we run, we're running them all.
Yeah.
We can though. I mean, it's not a bad idea for a bathroom break if you'd like. I'm just letting you know you're not obligated to, since it's an episode that focused solely on a book release.
I still think it'd be
And
nice to
technically
do
we are
so
still-
for a sponsor.
Okay.
Go
I
for it.
guess if it's here we go.
Greetings and Shabibans. We are the Retro Reductibus Cephala Podcast, a long-form bi-weekly show that celebrates all the things that made growing up awesome.
Well, that sounds good, but I don't know what all those words mean.
I think what Parasite Steve's trying to say is that on Retro Red Octopus, we explore a range of retro goodness, from toys, video games, and movies, to cartoons, and even snacks and school lunches.
Oh.
And we do it all with a positive spin, a slew of killer guests, and some very adult language.
And you know what else is cool?
No.
This crazy show is part of the Dorking Podcast Network with new episodes every Tentacle Tuesday.
What's that?
And if waiting 2 weeks for a new episode gives you a sad, know that we drop bonus episodes all the time, like the off-format Crow's Nest and an interview series we call The Brick.
You can listen to Retro Red Octopus on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any app that's cool enough to carry the only show that celebrates all the things that make growing up awesome.
Alrighty. And Mike, where do you want people to find you?
Okay. Well, I'm on Facebook a lot. Just look up my author page at Michael Guzman Author, or just Mike Guzman for my casual one. And I also can hang out at both the Allied and Fae Corps pages and the Discords for both of those places.
Awesome. Thank you. And I hope you have a wonderful night. Appreciate you reading to me again.
Yep. I got work in the morning, so you guys have a good night.
You too. Bye.
See you later.
So beautiful people. Did you guys have any other questions about each other's stories or anything you wanted to add?
No, this has been fun.
Yeah, man, it's been awesome. I really enjoyed it.
Are we going to
I
do the
appreciate
same thing for the release of Allight Menagerie?
Yeah. Yep.
Then
Which is gonna be like in a week or something like that. It's
And then
coming
I
up
get to
quick,
read
man.
the story for that one too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's on the 4th, so that one's like, I don't know when you guys are planning the release party yet, but I know that the release is going to happen on the 4th.
Yep.
And
So
there
we'll
are
have to
many
say-
releases happening in the next couple of months.
Yeah.
yes, there are. We will
Yeah.
get back to everybody about the release date. Well, the party date.
Yep.
Okay. I
Excited,
guess we're
though.
gonna. I am.
Oh, I thought of a
excited.
question. I actually did think of a question.
Okay.
What does everybody have coming out next? Like, is there a project that everybody's working on that's about to come out? Like, besides Allied Menagerie, 'cause we've talked about that a lot. I'm curious to see where everybody's at.
It's funny you should ask that, because I was thinking that same question during the break when you were showing the commercials, and then as soon as we come back, I forget. I forgot to ask it.
You laid
Okay.
it down and I picked it up.
Start with Ron.
Oh, starting with me. What do I have next? I have so many ideas. I have been creating a WordPad document of just brainstorming these ideas, and I'm trying to put them down so I don't forget any of them. My list keeps growing. The one thing that I'm currently working on right now is the next book that I want to release, which will be a full-fledged novel. I don't know what the final word count is going to be yet. I'm 20,000 words into it. I'm projecting it to probably be around 50,000, which is a bit short for a novel, but it's still a full-length book. If I can make it longer, I will. Just all depends on what kind of crazy, messed up shit my mind can come up with to throw into the book and what to do with my characters. Jenny, you read a little bit of it about what I'm tentatively calling the secret of the ooze, and it has nothing to do with the Ninja Turtles. The story itself is called The Last Entry of Grant Gilson. That's the working title, and I have a feeling it's probably going to end up being the final title of the book, just because I like it. What's that?
That is a great title for that. I like that.
The Last Entry of Grant Gilson.
Really
I like
good.
that too, yeah.
I have actually gone back through and rewrote quite a bit of it to make it more consistent and in line with what a journal entry should actually be, or starting out with a journal entry and then it switches into the full story. I already have an idea for the ending that I want, and I'm really excited to get there. It's just a matter of getting there, because there's so much other stuff that I want to do with my characters before that happens. So in the meantime, while I'm trying to work on that, I still want to stay involved with writing stories for Fae Corps anthologies, because ultimately one of the things that I would like to do is, after I have maybe 6, 7, 8 stories in anthologies, is to take all those stories and combine them into a collection and publish that as a book as well. So then I'll have them in the anthology, and then I'll have a collection of them all together in one book of just my stories. I have a few other short stories that I have already written that I need to go back through and do a lot of editing on them, that I want to put them together in a book as well. But it will be a themed book, and not necessarily horror related, but having to do with exaggerated reality, like take some facet of reality and then kind of exaggerate it to be something slightly different or slightly altered, which is not quite right, or it's out of place, but it still happens, in mundane, normal reality. So I have a collection of stories kind of following that theme that I want to put together into a book as well. It's going to be non-horror based. So that way, people, I keep hearing people say, "Oh, I don't really want to read that because I don't really like horror and all that." And I'm like, okay, well then I'll put a book together that has nothing to do with horror, and maybe they'll want to read that, and that might get them into my other books or whatnot. So I've got all these ideas floating around in my head of things I want to do. Notwithstanding, there's a gentleman I want to collaborate with. His name is Brian Hobbs. He lives in Canada, and he is a professional rap artist under the name of MC Snacks. Recently performed here in Columbus, and had a chance to talk to him. One of his songs, Junie, you saw the video for this, is called "The Pizza Ghoul" on his latest album. And we want to come up with a series of vignettes of short stories about the Pizza Ghoul, and then put those together into a collection, kind of based like Tales from the Gas Station. That was, I think, creepypastas that they were also put together into a collection of stories. And now it's on Audible if anybody's interested in looking at that. But that's an amazing book as well. So I kind of want to do the same thing with little vignette stories about the Pizza Ghoul and what his deal is, and why he exists, and why he's haunting our main character, Brian, MC Snacks. So many of these ideas, it's just a matter of having the time to sit down and actually do them, or even having the motivation to sit down and write. So yeah, when you ask me what I'm working on, that's it, man. I got too much stuff to work on. That's the problem.
Hell yeah.
That was a long-winded answer for probably what should have been a short-winded question.
Okay, what about you, Brass?
So a couple things. One, I actually just finished a story for an old anthology that's getting remade into with a big Kickstarter. It's this huge thing that's coming out. The part of it that I did was more lore for the Mythos Volume 2 originally, and I was recently asked to pen a new story for more lore from the Mythos 1 from Fresh Your Mind Publishing. We've actually had Stefan on a time or two. He's amazing. And they had one of the authors back out, so they reached out to me so I could be in both volumes now. So I'm really super excited about that. I wrote a brand new story about a dark ride, urban exploration type stuff, and it's obviously Cthulhu Mythos related. I had a lot of fun tying that into the Shadow over Innsmouth specifically. And a couple of little things, but mostly Shadow over Innsmouth. So I'm really happy with it. It's up there with my vampire story as my favorite recent story that I've written. Like, there's something weirdly magical about it and terrifying. And then I am working on finishing up the novella for oh my god, I just totally forgot the name of the project, and I'm in the middle of writing it. Yes, thank you. The Hunter's Handbook, Somehow We Manage. It's a comedy horror about an acting manager that does media at a haunted attraction full of things that are not quite human. So I'm almost halfway done with that entire thing, and that's one of the ones that we recorded into audio dramas that's inside of Outlight Radio. So every other episode of Outlight Radio actually has one of them in it. So I'm really excited to finish that up. And then the last thing I'm working on is a new kids book, but this time we're going like almost Goosebumps kind of style about Riverside. So I don't want to talk about that one a lot quite yet because there's a lot of special stuff about that one I really want to talk more about as I'm closer to getting it done for Kids Book Week. So lighter year for me, but I got a lot to do in classes this year. I have to enter the my thesis classes after the class I'm currently in. So in 9 weeks from now, I have to write a novel in 30 weeks and shop it to agents and all kinds of shit. And there's only 5 chapters of it written. So I'll talk more about that one later, but it's an epistolary with 50 plus characters. So there's a lot to it. I'm terrified of the project, but it was my dumbass for pitching it and them going, "We've never heard of this before. Please do this." And about a month after I got it okayed, I was like, well, fuck, I didn't think that was going to work. So now I have to write it.
I still wish we could publish it.
A little terrified about this one. I don't know. But it's going to be fun. But that's pretty much everything I'm working on.
I love the Hunter's Handbooks that I've been part of and got to read, and I have really enjoyed the new story for the more lore for the Mythos.
Yeah.
Martha and I enjoyed that greatly.
Rorschach and Tea Leaves. Fun fact. If you happen to go over to the Mothman statue, there's a very famous stop sign where everybody like puts stickers on it. And when one gets old and faded or like kind of comes up with whether you put new ones, one of my author stickers is on there, and it's Rorschach and Tea Leaves. I've actually got a couple on that one, but I've got the one about the car. He laughed, she laughed, the car laughed. That one's on there as well. And the Mr. Jones under the bed. If you get off the bed, I'm going to eat you. I forget what that one says exactly, but yeah, they're on the Mothman stop sign. So go over there and look at it if you're in the area.
What about you, Patty?
Okay, I personally have Hope Splashes coming out. I'm not even looking at when that's coming out. That's coming out in the next month or so. Serena has a poetry book coming out in the next month or so. This year is packed. I have people, I'm scheduling into 2025 now. Okay, because publishing, we're packed. But I'm working as Serena on a project called The Sea Witch, and I've been posting teasers about it and trying to get people to figure out what I'm doing a retelling on, because it's a Grimm's fairy tale and it's definitely different. I'm doing a different take on it, and so far everybody keeps wanting to go with the Little Mermaid. That's not the Little Mermaid. So if you're curious, go check out. I posted on my actual Facebook page, and the teaser's there. I'm curious as to whether anybody's actually going to get it. I think it's a well-written bit of work, and it's flowing, so maybe it'll actually get there.
I so can't wait. My newest story, The Night After We Laid Her to Rest, is going to be out in the newsletter coming out the 1st. And I have a poem and flash fiction I sent in for Anthology. I'm going to find out if we have been edited closer to the date. I'm hoping we are, because that'll make my kids so happy, because the art we worked on together. But yeah, the news and Allight Menagerie is the next place you could see my work. I hope you like it. What is your favorite character you've ever? Let's start with Patty.
I looked it up. Serena's poetry book is called Chasing Ghosts, and both Serena's and mine is June. One's June 14th. That's Hope Splashes, and the other one's June 21st. So
Awesome. And the day after Granny's birthday is Hope Splashes. What's your favorite character you've ever written, Patty?
my favorite character I have ever written has still got to be Shara from the Zombie Mook. She was my favorite. Still is my favorite. Will always be my favorite.
What about you, Raz?
Oof. That's super fucking hard for me, man. I tend to like my bad guys. I think right now, because it changes things. Sometimes it's Seth, because I've known Seth as a character for most of my life. Actually, I grew up with Seth. He was the first part I ever played, and he's a character that I remake in every D&D, that I get the opportunity to. But I've had my whole life to know him, so he's always one of them. And tied with him is Mr. Jones. As far as my bad guys go, and with the amount of personality that I put into Mr. Jones, and the fact that I know he's coming back and into future things, it's exciting to me. So there's a good guy and a bad guy I got to see equally, that I love them both. Just Mr. Jones is just, they're both me. Really, Mr. Jones is me and Seth is both me, and they're both drastically different versions of my personality. I'd say Mr. Jones is the version of me when I am done with someone or something, when they are no longer a human being to me, which is really, like, you have to try to do that, like, with me. Like, you have to really put effort into making me not see you as a human being anymore. But once you get to that, that's the side of me that almost no one ever sees, like, and hopefully will never see. And it was my way of giving it that part of me, I guess, a name and a personality. So I guess that's probably why I like him so much. And Seth is more the fun, loudmouth, doesn't shut up and does stupid things side of me, which everybody sees every day.
You might be wondering why I called you all here today.
I love doing that. I do that at the hunt sometimes when we're having a meeting. I'll just randomly stand up and say that shit. Or sometimes I'll do it in an elevator full of people I don't know, because it's even more fun when people don't know. Yeah, I read it somewhere. I think it was a Jeff Foxworthy thing I read as a kid, actually. Like him doing the stand up, and like I just started doing it. And to this day, I'm rarely ever in elevators, but I will do that in an elevator, because that joke made me laugh so hard. Like when I was young, it just stuck with me.
What about you, Ron?
My most favoritist character that I've ever written.
Yes.
When I was in college, I was dating this girl. This is also about the same time I had started in the Society for Creative Anachronisms, which I had mentioned earlier. I was dating this girl in college, and we dated for a while. And unfortunately, she broke up with me. I mean, why? How could you break up with all of this dumpster fire? So I was inspired to write an epic poem based on my SCA character persona and her SCA character persona, called The Tale of Wulfric the Wanderer and the Lady Sandal. Wulfric was my SCA name. Wulfric was a rogue, kind of a ne'er-do-well, wanders from place to place, doesn't really have any particular goal in life, and he comes across the Lady Sandal, who was engaged to be wed to this evil wizard named Jared. And so she ran away in the night. Anybody that had ever tried to get close to her or tried to love her or marry her, Jared would have killed. So Wulfric, he knew better than to try to approach her lest he face Jared's wrath. It's a 3-part poem. It's rather long. It's probably, I think, somewhere around like 400 and something lines, I think. Full story. I don't know. It's just Wulfric being a part of me and the SEA. It's sort of become like an alter ego, a separate identity from myself. And I've just been known by that name for a long time in the SCA. People they call me Wolfie or Wolf. It's always just been a part of me, and nothing was ever done with that epic poem. So it still exists. It's still out there, but it's never been published. And that's one of the things that I would like to do with Fae Corps as well, is to finally get it out there in print with something. I always thought that it might make a good like children's book in some way. But yeah, I think. And then of course playing EverQuest, because I was a hardcore EverQuest junkie back in the day.
Evercrack.
Yeah, exactly. Never rests. I named most of my characters from that poem. I have a high elf cleric named Sandal. I have a rogue named Wulfric, and I have a druid named Rado, which is one of the main characters.
Nice.
It's the third part of the story that explains how Wulfric came to his ultimate demise, one would say. It is an epic poem, so it has to have a tragic ending, right? Not to spoil it for anybody, but okay, Wulfric dies. All right, there you go. Now you don't need to read it. I've already ruined it for you. But yeah,
I want to read it anyway.
I wrote the story when I was 21 years old, so it's been around for 30 years, and I've never done anything with it. So that would be my favorite character.
Oh yeah.
And yes, Stephen, you might be late again, but you can always #replay and then listen to all the great stories. But we're still happy you're here.
I was just talking about you. You literally missed me talking about you and more lore. I was just telling them I was excited to have a new story in Volume 1 and how much they need to check it out, and that we're going to make you come on again and talk to us all about it.
Oh, yeah. Mine would be Friday, as Patty guessed. It started out with Friday Baldwin. She was genetically made in a lab from like 7 fathers and a mom. And she's bioengineered to be extremely fast and a killer and a hacker and all sorts of different things. And you just go through her life in the book Friday. But for me, I'm Ginny. You notice the paranormal and the best friend Martha, which is Liz, and my different friends from earlier in my life all rolled into the story. So definitely Friday. Yes, 3 for more lore from the Mythos. I love what the ones I have. I can't wait to see updated versions.
It's awesome, man. It's really it's gonna be all special edition stuff. He's gonna talk about and release at some point. I can't talk about anything beyond that yet.
They will be mine soon. But either way, did you have any questions, Ron?
Let me think. Jenny, I thought you had. I thought I'd sent you the link. I thought you had read my epic poem. No,
I have.
Wait until it's published. Raz, you read it?
Yeah, you actually put it in a chat with all it was a while ago. It was a while ago that you put it in there. Like very early on, like you joined in the network. I remember us talking about that and you putting it up there, and I remember reading it.
And
it was actually the first thing of yours that I read all the way through.
Oh, so it was that good or what?
I know I really liked it a lot. I enjoyed the shit out of it. I'm glad to hear that you're actually gonna release it.
Yeah, I talked to Patty about it a while back that I wanted to put it out there, and she said that there's a possibility we're doing an anthology of poetry next year. So I thought about putting it in that, and since it's 3 separate poems that are all fairly lengthy, I think it would be good to like split them up within the book.
Makes sense, yeah. It's a cool idea, man.
She says it's in December in verse, and I can't
Honestly,
wait because my kid's going to be published for the first time in that book. Cassie's first ever being published.
Nice. I didn't even know about that one.
Yeah. Okay. There's a story behind it. We always do a spring and a fall anthology.
Mm-hmm.
And one of our authors was having trouble with her husband. I'm not going into any more detail than that, but
right.
She was writing some really gut-wrenching poetry, and she's like, please tell me there's going to be an anthology for poetry coming up soon. I'm like, yeah, we're going to do it in December. So I committed myself to doing another anthology this year, knowing I'd already planned to do Owlite and the spring one, which is Fae Propaganda, and Nightmare Whiskers, which is our fall one, which is all about the monsters. The call's going out on the blog the 1st of June for that one. I'd already committed because I told the author that we would do Honesty and Verse, which is the December one that's all about poetry.
Oh, yeah.
Because she needed somewhere to vent.
Oh, yeah. I may have to send you something, man.
I would like to say that I have already submitted my story for Nightmare Whiskers that coming out later this year, and I believe Patty has already read it.
I have. It's a really good one.
I need to write that. Still,
I'm very excited about that story, and it sucks that I have to wait for it to come out to share it with people because it's such a cute story.
The fun thing is the authors that do publish with me get the calls months before everybody else, because I end up, as soon as I finish an anthology, which that means as soon as I get all of the stuff in for the spring anthology, I will put the call for the fall anthology into our Discord for all of my authors. So if you want to know ahead of time what we're doing, you gotta join my Discord, dude.
Gotta be on the Discord.
And you've received ours. I really hope you at least accept our art and poem for Nightmare Whiskers.
I very likely will. It was wonderfully written, and the art is gorgeous. I just can't until I get all of it in, accept anything, because if I do, then it becomes problematic.
Yeah, and I don't want you to be unfair, but me from hoping, and I'm not telling Sophie anything until after. But you had already told Cassie she was accepted, so I told her.
Yeah. But that's in honesty and verse, so.
Yes.
And honesty and verse, I don't have any limits on, so I can accept anything that comes my way with that one. Because that one's an unpaid anthology.
Right.
So even epic poems that are
even epic poems.
He wants to know if you have a name for the collection, the Anthology. Ron.
For my book?
Yeah.
The one after my novel?
Yes.
Do I have a name for my collection of stories that I'm going to do after the novel? Yes, in fact, since I talked about how it's all going to be about exaggerated reality or something that is altered, not quite right, I am actually planning on calling it exaggerated reality. I'll just call it for what it is.
Awesome. Braz named one of my books already. Friday's Fractures.
Friday's what?
Friday's Fractures.
Friday's Fractures. I like it.
Reminds me of Rocky and Bullwinkle, Fractured Fairy Tales.
Right?
Exactly.
Now I'm going to pull a rabbit out of a hat.
I was shooting for a book a year and to try to keep writing stories for the anthologies that Fae Corps puts out. But with all of these ideas that I have, I'm wondering if I should do more than one a year. But then Patty would be like, "No, slow down! I can't handle all of this." And, so I don't know. A book a year.
Don't make bets.
You know how many?
Don't make bets.
So I've done a lot of research and talked to a lot of different people. There's actually a club. I'm an honorary member, but not an official one yet. It's called the 5 a Year Club. They say if you can release 5 books a year or 5 books a year for 5 years, you will literally be able to supposedly, as long as some people buy them here and there, it's enough content to officially retire and become a writer, for a living. And so far, everyone that's in that club that it has actually done for 5 years, they're already there. They no longer have a normal job anymore, and some of them have only been doing it for the one guy's only been doing it for 3 years, and he's already there. So it's really inspiring to watch all the stuff they talk about, because I get to watch their mindset and how they do things, and it's helped me out a lot. And I was going to go after this 3 years ago and start, and then my whole life and world fell apart, and I was like, well, I did 3.
I don't know, man. That's a book about every 2 months, between every 2 and 3 months. That is a lot of writing in a very short amount of time.
It totally is. It 100% is. Novellas do count, so that does help some. Poetry books, that counts. So it just depends on kids' books, that counts, because it's still a book. So the word count just changes depending on what project you want to do. Where they say a book, it just has to be 5 a year. For 5 years. It's wild, dude. I'm watching it happen in front of me. No, it's not horror. It's all genres. Literally, it's across genres. Some of the people that do the best with this are paranormal romance and cozy mysteries. For some reason, those 2 genres, I see people writing those genres pump them out the most. And sometimes they will write all 5 books as one giant long book, like with different arcs and different stuff, and then they'll write it all. And then when they get, like ever so often they'll cut, and that's a book. But they just write it from one template. And they say that's one of the ways they're able to. And some of them are now doing like 6-7 books a year.
Yeah, that's about 250,000, 300,000 words to write it as one long book, and then to break it down into 5 separate ones.
Well, some of them will also write a couple, like, some of the chapters from a different point of view, a different character's point of view, and cut that as a novella. You know what I mean? So it's that's what I'm saying. Like, it's subjective on how you do your cuts and your word counts and your releases. So, like, if you think about it like that, it's possible. Even with that, though, it feels like a lot because it is.
That's full-time writing, man.
I don't know, man. I've written entire books from entire anthologies from beginning to end during Nano, and done like 50 to 70K in a month. So I mean, it's doable. And I'm gonna tell you, that whole month, it was a lot, and I was stressed a lot. Every year that month, I'm really stressed. But holy shit, dude! When it's over, I feel like I can't write for 3 months. Like, my brain is just, it's goo. There you go.
I would think if I were to do that, I would probably try to do it after I retire, because I feel like my day job would get in the way, and I wouldn't have as much time to write as I would like.
Yeah. It's a lot.
Patty put out 9 poetry books and 2 kids books. And
See,
I'm like, I thought you put out 9 last year.
That's already a year of that handled.
But
right
as far
there.
as I know, this is Patty's full-time job, so
it is.
And there was like 7 to 10 the year before.
Yep. Yeah, you do have to be the writer, not the publisher. Because you were just talking about in the private chat about publishing the ones you publish, but you have to actually write 5. But it sounds like you already got one of your 5 years done, man. Just keep on going. But I think I could do it. I just think I need to be in a better headspace and have less on my plate to want to tackle that. But I never know, because next year, I already have 2 planned at least. So I don't know. We'll see.
One of them I keep getting asked about constantly, and I have to say, no, not yet, Martha.
What? Oh, yeah. That's coming out next year. The end of the trilogy's coming out. Riverside Chronicles 2. Okay. And I don't know what all else yet. That's a next year me problem. That is.
Okay, that's fine. I don't even know what techno romance would be. I've never heard that term.
or
Technological romance, like maybe some cyberpunk.
Well, I do have a story like that. It's called The Fortress of Cyberpunk Romance.
See, I think that would count as horror techno romance.
That was
It wasn't technically horror; it was just cyberpunk.
a very interesting story, though.
It's probably one of the stories that I'll include in the exaggerated reality. Although I'm thinking that I may go through and change a few things about it, because that story was very, very highly inspired by the movie Johnny Mnemonic. And I was reading William Gibson at the time. Johnny Mnemonic is actually a short story that was in William Gibson's book Count Zero.
Yep.
So it's not its own standalone novel, but it takes place in William Gibson's cyberverse that he set up. And supposedly it's the same cyberverse that his book Neuromancer takes place in as well.
Yeah.
That they're all connected. So
I love those.
I watched Johnny Mnemonic with, starring Keanu Reeves. And I absolutely love the movie. And the story itself is I mean, it's really good within the book when I did read it. But so yeah, that's kind of what sparked the idea for it. So a lot of the stuff in that story is directly inspired by stuff you see in Johnny Mnemonic. I just kind of took it in a different direction and made it a cyberpunk romance story. But I want to, even though I know that it's inspired by Johnny Mnemonic, and I took it in that direction, I do actually want to try to rewrite it and take it away from that direction. I want to make it its own standalone story to where it doesn't really have anything to do with Johnny Mnemonic. I'm not entirely certain how to do that yet.
We'll get there. Okay, guys, we have been on for 3 hours and 15 minutes. This is the longest release party I've ever been part of.
Well, it's not like the 24-hour one we did.
Yeah, that one was painful.
Yeah, but we'll do another one next year.
Or we'll do another one after Allight Menagerie comes out.
Yeah. The goal is to do at least 124-hour a year, just because it's I think the next one will go a lot better though. It'll be a lot different. You get better at it every time, or you're supposed to.
Well, you're supposed to do bigger and better, so the next one has to be 48 hours.
No.
Next year we'll do 72 hours.
No, we're going to do 24 hours in 1 minute. Or 1 second, 24 hours. Technically, this show did kind of go a little bit past 24 hours, but
yeah. But no, we're just not going to do that. But yeah.
How about no? How about we don't say we did?
I'm okay with the 24 hours.
Yeah, that's enough. If someone wanted to pay me enough, I would do a 48-hour show. But there better be donations coming in at that point, man, and then I'll stay awake and do it. But
and gratuitous donuts.
Yeah.
I did that recently.
We'll set them up so people can send me Duncan.
That sucked.
It was. Anyway. Yeah, I mean, you were the only ones that did the whole time too. Like that was a lot.
Yes. But either way, thank you guys for coming. We appreciate you. We hope you enjoyed our stories. We hope you buy our book because we're really proud of it. It is my first story that I'd written that long ever. And yeah. Where would you like people to find you, Patty?
Fae Corps Publishing.com, or you can do it at FaeCorpsPublishing.org. Either one will lead you to the same spot. That's the Fae Corps page. My personal blog is pattymouse.wordpress.com because we still haven't figured out how to get pattymouse.com working quite right. But otherwise, I'm Patty Mouse everywhere. We pretty much got Fae Corps Publishing everywhere, or Fae Corps Pub. So it's not hard to find us. Books2read.com. The reading list is Fae Corps LLC to see the whole catalog. And most of the writers that have more than one books get their own little reading list with their own name. All three of the ones on here have it, because all three of the ones on here have been in at least more than one book. So, I'm easy to find.
What about you, Ron?
Judy says, "Where can we find you, Patty?" And Patty says, "Please don't. I got too much work to do." Where can you find me? Well, just like the rest of us here, you can find me with Owlite doing random shows here and there, usually Sundays and Monday nights, and every now and then a Friday night when Raz actually sends me the link. You know,
I don't control links for that show.
I do have a YouTube channel, though I don't use it very often. It's Wolf Dojo, or maybe it's just Wolf Ricard here on YouTube. I don't remember, but yeah, you can look me up. I'm mostly on TikTok, where I make martial arts related content. I am a professional martial artist outside of all of the writing and the podcasting and all of that. So if you're into that sort of thing, go check out my TikTok and maybe you can learn something about martial arts. Otherwise, you can find me on my writer page, Ronald W. Gillespie Jr. author on Facebook, which is where I will be chronicling the my writing journey and putting stuff out there. And admittedly, I've been a little bit lackluster about doing that lately, but I should be making a few posts here within the next day or two as I continue writing on my novel, which I hope will be out around next February. So again, that's the last entry of Grant Gilson, or The Secret of the Ooze. And I'm liking where it's going, and I really hope people like it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, what about you, Raz?
You can find me at raztslasher.com. You can type my name into social media. You'll find me just about everywhere, and you will be speaking to the best Raz T Slasher cosplayer in the world, which is Jenny. She handles a lot of that for me because I call her Saint Friday. She's amazing. You can find me here on the Allied Network. You can find me at Hell's Dungeon. Lots of places, man. But most importantly, you can find me in your mom's house tomorrow morning. I'm there for the pancakes.
And thank you again for my theme song. I still dance with that every time. Yes, he is our video wizard, and he is epic and awesome. You can find me on Raz's page. You can find me on Del and Carrie's page. You can find me on Jason's page. You can find me on Amina's page. You can find me on Patty's page, and Serena's, and mine, and Fae Corps, and Elliott, and I just like to pretend I'm everybody. It seems to be working so far. Nobody's figured it out yet.
Yeah.
But you do it so much better than I do.
Well, careful what you say, or I'll just have you do all of my stuff too. In fact, hell, you can even write the stories for me if you want. Just
you write the stories, you make the admin of your page, I'll post all the stuff. Either way, come type message in the Elliott page, Fae Corps, whatever. I'll talk to you. Please read our stories. Worked really hard on them, and we're proud of them all. And I'm really grateful to get to be part of Fae Corps and Elliott. The last 4 years have been just getting better and better. And I'd like to thank them for that, and my amazing, awesome husband. So have a great night. Thank you for being here. Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah.
Happy trails to you.